ads on this channel. I need to update the intro for several reasons, not the least of which is that it's blaringly loud. We are comrades on this channel. Welcome to Socialism Saturday, guys. Socialism Saturday is when we watch socialism, real socialism, and we talk about it and we learn what the enemy is thinking and what they believe, because if you do not know what the enemy thinks and what they believe, then you cannot effectively fight them. You know, I ran a book club earlier today that was about the Unabomber. We read the Unabomber manifesto in my community, and you know, something that a lot of people in the book club struggled with is really separating what the Unabomber did with his actual manifesto. And it's like, you and I understand that this is a skill that needs to be developed, and this is one of the reasons why we watch Socialism Saturday. Um, because like you need to be able to separate what you think of these people from understanding what they think and how they see the world. If you cannot understand the people that you are fighting, you will never, ever, ever be able to win. And so the reason that we sit here and we watch socialism on Saturday is to listen to the enemy in their full form. We don't want to take clips because clips are usually taken out of context. We want to listen to the good bits. We want to listen to the bad bits. We want to listen to the boring bits. We want to listen to the cringy bits, because if we don't do the whole thing, then we will not truly understand our enemy. This is not about debate bro bullshit. This is not about destroying other people by taking one word out of context of an hour-long discussion and then blowing that up to be the biggest thing. This is about listening to a different philosophy, listening to a way that people see the world that we do not agree with, and then using that information to fight our best fight, to stand up for what we believe in. That is what we're doing here on Socialism Saturday. And we've got one heck of a thing tonight. Now, today, we are actually going a little bit more mainstream socialism than we usually go. Usually on Socialism Saturday, I find the farthest left of the far left, the crazies that only exist in the bowels of the internet, and we watch that. And that is if you have not seen Socialism Saturday, I strongly encourage you to go back into the archives. I have a whole playlist on the channel. You can find the back episodes. Watch the ones about surrogacy. Those are the most effed up. But we're going just slightly more mainstream today, because I was looking around for something for us to watch, and I decided, why not go to Jacobin Magazine's YouTube channel? Jacobin is a socialist magazine. It's oh no, oh shit. I might have to cancel out and come back, guys. My Chrome apparently is telling me I can't share my screen. Oh no, hang on one second, guys. Okay, hang on. We might need to troubleshoot just a little bit. I do apologize. I didn't realize that my Chrome had unhooked itself in the meantime. Hang on, let me just get my permissions open. Hang on. Sorry, I need to troubleshoot live on air. We're going to get to the socialism in a second, but we can't get to the socialism if I can't share my damn screen with you. I don't know why this is happening. Oh my gosh, this sucks. Okay, guys, hang on. Everyone, sit tight. I'm going to be right back in like 2 seconds. And you may lose me for a second, but okay, hang on. It's opening my preferences, so I'm not out. I'm not bounced out just yet. No, it is. It does say I can share my screen. Okay, guys, I'm going to restart my Chrome. Now, the stream will stay live. Just sit tight. I just need to reboot my Chrome and come back in. The stream will stay live. Talk amongst yourself for 2 seconds, and hopefully this will fix the problem. Okay, be right back. Bye. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Let me see if I can share my screen now. I apologize again, guys, for the slight delay. Hang on. Let me see if I can share my screen. Chrome apparently updated. It works. We're back. We're back in business. Chrome updated without my knowledge. I apologize, guys. Okay. We're back. So I was looking around for socialism content for us to be able to watch, and I came across Jacobin magazine, which is a legitimately socialist magazine. And apparently, did you guys know? I'm looking for default view here because maybe I just need to make the browser bigger. Um, there it is. So Jacobin magazine, apparently Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks has a weekly show with Jacobin magazine. Did anyone know this? Like she's on the Young Turks and she's like has this side gig where she's doing socialist content. So I was like, we have to watch this. And what I found for us to watch is it's about a year old, so it's not a new thing, but that's okay. And this is let me read you the description. Legendary socialist activist and professor Dr. Cornel West is talking to us about how the US left can still build and power after the Bernie campaigns and the moral force of our movement for justice. So basically, they're gonna have a conversation with Cornel West about how socialists can win in America. That's actually what it's called. Socialists can actually win in America. Well, to be fair, the Jacobin magazine isn't too far removed from TYT. No, that's very true. But we're gonna watch it. This is a really long video too. This is like 2.5 hours long. So I hope everyone has a drink. I hope everyone has is ready for their best socialism because that's what we're watching tonight. And again, guys, this is not about agreeing with them. This is about understanding what they think and why they think it. Now, I don't know exactly how this is going to go, but I will say for other socialism events that the other socialist Saturdays that we've done, sometimes socialists can be really hard to understand. So, if you're new here for Socialism Saturday, first of all, thank you for joining me. Please mount that like button for me. On this particular stream, I'm going to keep the chat up because I want to see what the chat has to say in this too. I don't normally do this, but I oftentimes think that the chat is just as interesting as the actual video itself, and so I think it's good for us to watch both. But if you have a hard time understanding what they're saying and some of the points that they're making, it's okay. Socialism is like a whole new language, and I'll do my very best to try to decipher it. I'll do my very best to try to explain how this lines up with what's currently going on. And again, one thing I really want everyone to keep in mind is that these people are winning. The reason that we watch socialism is because when you go back into the archives and watch something that like a socialist said on YouTube like 5 years ago, and it might be on like a crappy little channel with only a couple hundred views and not even that many people have watched it, what you're going to find is that the current talking points on CNN, the current talking points of the Democratic Party are directly in line with what these people were saying like 5 years ago. So these people are winning. They might be crazy. You might think that they have nothing of value to say. You might want to say, oh, I don't even know why we're doing this. We're doing this because they're kicking all of our asses. And we can't start winning until we start listening to what they're saying and what they are trying to do. So I'll do my very best to help you decipher it. If you have thoughts about what they're saying, please go ahead and chat them in as well. If you say something super smart, I'll put it on the screen. We can all talk about it. This is going to be a little bit of a longer video, so I hope you all hunker down, sit tight. I have some beer with me. Hang on. My husband drank all my craft beer last night after happy hour, so he went and replenished it at the store. Let me show you what I got. So I've got a couple Strawberry Bliss sours, and it says, "It will make you blush" on the can. My husband assured me that this beer is very, very good. It's so good, he bought 4 of them. I have 2 of them here. And then, Ba, I'm glad you're here because I got a beer for you. It's called Turning Violet. It's a blueberry sour. So we might try that one next. If you guys are drinking something fun, please go ahead and chat it in. I'm going to go ahead and open this strawberry beer, which I bet is going to be nice and red, which will be perfect for our stream today to have a nice red drink to go along with it. Oh, maybe not nice and red. I could have gone for a little bit more strawberry fake color, but probably that's good. Oh, it looks so creamy. All right, guys. Cheers. Thank you for. Oh, it's definitely got some strawberries in it. It's got stuff in it. Look at that. It's got like strawberry seeds. I can smell the strawberry from here. Holy shit. Cheers, guys. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. That's a very strawberry beer. I'm going to let that settle a little bit. All right. Let's get this party started. Please mount that like button if you have not already. Please subscribe to the channel. We do this every Saturday at 6 p.m. Usually my Chrome is actually working, so I don't need to restart. Let's hear what Anna and Cornel West in Jacobin Magazine has to say about how socialists can win in America.
Hello, hello. Welcome to Weekends with Anna Kasparian and Nando Vila. It's good to be back, Nando.
Great to be back.
Nando
I'm
is
feeling
dancing
good.
to
I'm feeling
absolutely
fresh.
nothing.
I'm feeling renewed.
Ooh, you're feeling
excited
fresh.
for today. Feeling fresh,
like
very
that.
fresh. Feeling renewed. Feeling excited for today's show. We got brother Dr. Cornel West.
Cornel West always.
I'm so excited. I mean, so it's a pre-taped interview. We're going to toss to it after we do our decode segment. So if you see us looking different, dressed differently, it's a pre-taped interview, but I promise you, you're going to love it. I think we asked some pretty good questions in regard to, you know, the left-wing strategy, how to keep fighting, even though we're experiencing some pretty dire times. Things look bleak.
Isn't that interesting? I want to remind everyone, this was streamed on July 31st, 2021. And so Anna Kasparian assessed that things were looking pretty bleak for the left on July 31st, 2021. Remember, that's when the Democrats controlled everything. So why did she think it was looking bleak? And obviously it hasn't turned out very bleak because the Republicans got their asses handed to them in the midterms, just like I said they would, and no one listened to me, but we won't talk about that anymore.
He always has this ability to kind of pump energy into you, you know, and get you to like just see the bigger picture and think strategically about how to move forward, which is difficult to do, really, but he's great.
Yeah. He's amazing. He's out there stumping for Nina Turner today. I saw some videos that came out of that. You know, Nina Turner's election's on Tuesday. We wish her luck. Hopefully she can beat back the Democratic Party's establishment candidate who's well-funded, you know, by like all the most awful people in the world, endorsed by Hillary Clinton, all that stuff. So, you know, at least she's got Cornel West in her corner.
I'm so glad this went in that direction because I really need to emphasize this point. Socialists, the real ones, hate the Democrats just as much as Trump people hate the Republicans. They're not all on the same team, but what they do, which is not what Republicans do, which is stupid, is they work together with the people that they need to when they need to do it, which is how they ended up winning the midterms, because they put all their shit aside and they did what they needed to do anyway.
Yeah, Cornel West, Bernie Sanders, AOC, you know, there are some pretty big name progressives out there campaigning on her behalf. So fingers crossed, corporate Democrats have poured a lot of money into the corporate Democrat candidate's race. So that's Chantel Brown. And she's awful. She's so awful that, you know, during a recent rally speech, she needed a clap track.
Socialism in the long game. That's why they win.
Appear as though, you know, there was a big audience that was supportive of her message. And by the way, her message was mostly, I'm able to reach across the aisle, as if Democratic voters are interested in playing patty cakes with corporate Republicans. It's just, anyway, so we'll see how that all plays out. But for the purposes of our show, Nando, why don't we start off by discussing two topics. The topic that I wanted to talk about this morning is, or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country or the planet, is a laboratory, a pharmaceutical laboratory that makes generic drugs. It's actually shipping its jobs over to a different country. And this is relevant because it shows you just how the financial interests of our politicians play a huge role in the decisions they make, or whether or not they intervene on certain issues, right? So let's give you the details on that. So there's a critical plant that manufactures critical generic drugs in the state of West Virginia. Of course, that's the state where Joe Manchin happens to be a senator. And they are deciding to move their operations abroad, threatening America's generic drug supply, which is something we should be very thoughtful about, considering the fragility of our supply chains, what we experienced during coronavirus. But it's also outsourcing thousands of unionized jobs. So Vanity Fair did an excellent job with this piece. I highly recommend you guys check it out and read the entirety of it. It has all these details and tidbits that we can't get into for the purposes of this show right now. But they write that Mylan Laboratories has made 61 drug products, including a substantial portion of the world's supply of a critical thyroid medicine. It's 1,431 highly trained workers. That includes analytical chemists, industrial engineers, and senior janitors among them, are represented by the Steelworkers Union. All are slated to be laid off by the month's end, meaning literally today. It's the last day of July. And just to give you a sense of how much downsizing had already happened with this laboratory, at its height back in 2016, the Morgantown manufacturing site employed more than 3,700 full-time employees and made more than 1,400 drug products, a scale that dwarfs most American drug manufacturing sites, according to FDA records. And so when the Steelworkers Union approached Joe Manchin, they're trying to get in touch with him. They're like, look, Joe Manchin says he cares about unionized jobs. He says he cares about jobs in the state of West Virginia most of all. So we just need to get a meeting with him. We need to talk with him, and I'm sure he'll intervene. Except the opposite happened. They get in touch with him. He's on the Senate floor. He gives them a brief 10-minute conversation over the phone. And here's what he says to them. Sorry about your luck. It sounds like they've reached a corporate decision.
For those who just joined, this was in July of 2021 that this was filmed. So this is a little bit older, not too old, but we do need to keep the time frame in mind. They don't care. They think they're going to be the leaders. They don't care. And they're winning.
There's very little I can do. There's
nothing to be done. Nothing to be done.
No. I mean, right now, he's like, puffing up his chest and walking around the Senate floor like he's the actual president of the United States. He understands the kind of power he has. But when it comes to this laboratory, when it comes to these jobs in West Virginia, he's not doing anything. Why? Well, this laboratory recently did a merger. And in the process of that merger, his daughter, who was an executive at Mylan, receives a $30.8 million golden parachute, and her buddies are still working at Mylan as executives. So let's not stir the pot. My daughter's making a buck off this, and we don't want to upset anyone.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things in America. The political system is not geared toward protecting jobs or anything like that. I mean, it's just fully dedicated to protecting corporate profits, even if that means decimating local jobs. I mean, politicians often, are stressed a lot like jobs in their state and things like that. And
right now, she doesn't believe in private property.
Schumer, trying to give massive subsidies to like microchip manufacturers to bring jobs to his state or whatever. But like when push comes to shove, they will never do it in a way that threatens corporate profits. They'll do it by, offering these like insane tax breaks and things like that, like just giving them more money to like beg them.
I'll bet Anna Kasparian has private property,
and then often they don't anyway. I mean, but there are, it's the government. They can do things like there are things to be done. There is industrial policy to be done. They can start their own. They can take over factories. They can force companies to stay here. There's a million things that they can do, but there's this kind of learned helplessness from our political class, that is just like, what are we supposed to do? We're just the government. We can't intervene in the economy. Like, that'd be crazy. We would never intervene in the economy. And then in the case of Manchin, obviously there's this comical conflict of interest with his daughter making tens of millions of dollars. I mean, it's a perfect microcosm of what our government is, vis-a-vis its role in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Manchin is like a walking sign for everything that's wrong in our federal government, right? Because he's a walking conflict of interest, because this is just one of those conflicts of interest. Another conflict of interest is his personal investment in a hotel chain in his own state.
Hang on. So I think you're a new viewer of Socialism Saturday, because I don't remember seeing you before, but I want to make something very, very clear about why we're watching Socialism Saturday. I don't want this to be one of those things where we see in the chat just full of like, these people think real socialism has never been tried and they just don't know what they're talking about. And blah, 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 blah. I don't want that here. The reason I don't want that here is that we are supposed to be listening to what they're saying. If we don't listen to what they are saying, and I mean really listen and pay attention to how they understand the world and how they see the world, we are never going to defeat them, okay? Whether it doesn't matter what you think about their ideas. You can hate their ideas. You can think they're massive hypocrites. You can think they're stupid. You can think whatever you want. The goal of Socialism Saturday is to understand what they believe. Because there's a lot of people right now doing a lot of talking. And we can nitpick every single thing that's going to come out of Anna Kasparian's mouth and say, oh, well, she is rich and works for the Young Turks. Therefore, she obviously believes in capitalism. But we need to start listening. We need to start listening. Even though we think their ideas are stupid. If we spend the whole time just trying to dissect their ideas and point out all the ways in which they're stupid, we aren't listening to what they're saying and we're not understanding them. That is the goal of this. So I just want to set that expectation for people in the chat. This is really important. And I actually prioritize winning over feelings. So that's just the way we're going to go.
Which is why he didn't want to increase the federal minimum wage. That would actually hurt his bottom line. Then we found out recently that he's receiving nearly $500,000 a year off of his investments in dirty coal in the state of West Virginia. He is literally financially incentivized to work against us. Doesn't matter if he's a Democrat, doesn't matter if he's a Republican. And so when I take a step back and I think about what are the solutions, right? Because, we're about to talk about the eviction moratorium ending, and you look at the federal government and it's just dog crap. It's absolute garbage. I mean, what we're seeing in the way that they're handling the infrastructure bill, in the way that they've responded to the economic concerns of people who are still laid off, still don't have their jobs, and are about to get evicted. I mean, it shows you how broken that system is. And Democrats are unwilling to use the tools in their toolbox that, honestly, as much as I can't stand the guy, Donald Trump had no problem using obscure rules and provisions to get what he wants.
Jay Slice, I know you're a Democrat, bro, but Anna Kasparian is doing a weekly show with Jacobin magazine, which is not moderate. This is pure socialism. She's advocating for having the means of production taken away from private ownership. She's advocating for there not to be landlords. And that's just been in the first 5 minutes. She is not a moderate in any way, shape, or form. She doesn't believe in private property. She's showing that right now. You are not a moderate if you don't believe in private property.
Democrats aren't willing to do it.
Of course not. And you bring up the eviction moratorium, which just expired. And, aside from the human catastrophe that is, right? Millions of people potentially evicted in the coming months. All these people are behind on their rent. There's been no rental assistance. There's just been this eviction moratorium, which is the absolute bare minimum thing with, to be done in a case like the coronavirus pandemic. But if you zoom out from a political level, from a political standpoint, a Republican that runs in the 2022 election can easily say, when we were in power, we protected, you from getting evicted. And then the Democrats got in power and they let you get evicted. And, you know, like, and they would be correct about that. Like they would be 100% correct about that. When we control the government with Trump and we control the Senate and the House, we passed an eviction moratorium.
Well,
when the Democrats got in there, they took it away.
This is true enough. She seems moderate.
Yeah.
What's the argument against?
Absolutely right. I mean, like the accurate argument would be, but I mean, it's a weak argument, but the accurate argument would be, yeah, you guys had that moratorium, but you let BlackRock evict hundreds of people anyway. You didn't actually enforce the moratorium. And by the way, those evictions continued during Biden's administration as well. That's why it's an incredibly weak argument. But in terms of messaging, we already know what the story is. We know that the Democratic Party really fails in aggressive messaging, especially when Republicans tend to have a point. And in this case, they absolutely do have a point. What is amazing to me is that everything in the federal government is so overpowered by corporate donors that Democrats can't even see straight. They can't even see the damage that they're doing to their own political careers because they're following along with what the corporate donors want. I mean, these landlords, corporate landlords, they don't want the moratorium to continue. I mean, BlackRock just snatched up a bunch of single family homes. They want a return on that investment. They want to be able to evict the people who are unable to pay their rent.
I'm living for
and so I have no doubt that these are the kinds of conversations that are taking place behind closed doors. I mean, this is not the United States of America. This is the Chamber of Commerce, you know, the United States of Chamber of Commerce. Like that's what this is at this point. And that's the problem. And it doesn't matter if Democrats are, you know, kicking their own asses and hurting their own political futures. They're just going to keep doing this. And it's pathetic.
Yeah, I mean, and it just goes to show. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, the speaker of the House, the leader of the Democrats.
All right, Bot is saying in the chat that my volume is lower compared to them, and it does actually sound lower on my end too. But oftentimes, when my volume sounds lower to me, it sounds louder to you guys. So I'm perfectly happy to turn up my volume. All right, I'm lower. Okay. I will turn up my volume then a little bit more. We'll see. And we'll just have to work it out, guys. Like sometimes things sound normal on my end and they sound completely different to you. I have absolutely no idea why that is, but that's just the way it goes. I can turn their volume down a little bit. I can turn my volume up and we can see if that levels out.
Democrats in Congress.
How does it sound now?
You know, the nominal kind of left of center party in the United States.
How does it sound now?
Faced with this kind of absolute human catastrophe that's coming. You know, I think there's as many as 6 million people that are behind on their rent. There's no rental assistance coming.
Excellent.
With landlords able to evict these people, there's nothing stopping them from doing it. And she didn't even know about it. I mean, Kale, can you pull up the tweet? She goes, Pelosi says part of the problem was last minute notice from White House about the need to handle legislatively. Really, we only learned about this yesterday. Not really enough time to socialize it within our caucus to build the consensus necessary. Okay. She just had no idea that this was coming. You know, nothing to be, you know, she needs to be told.
You know
like, why? It's not like there was like media coverage of this. And of course there was. There's been reports. There's been like, you know, we knew the deadline. The deadline was put into the legislation in the first place. But they forgot about it or they didn't know.
You know the difference between Democrats and conservatives? This just occurred to me as I was thinking about how Anna Kasparian was like shitting on the Democrats. And this is the difference between the left and the right. The left, when the farthest of the far left shit on the Democrats like make adjustments on the sly to like integrate their integrate the ideas of the far left into their platform. This is why we can listen to Socialism from like 5 years ago and today see those talking points show up in the Democratic Party, because the Democrats may not acknowledge the socialists and they may not like the socialists, but they do listen to them and they know they can't win without them. And so they do make changes and adjustments based on what these people say, which is why today the Democrats are saying the same thing that the socialists said 5 years ago. Here's the difference with Republicans and conservatives. They don't fucking listen. Because if you give them criticism, and I was actually talking about this on Twitter earlier today, if you criticize conservatives or Republicans, what they're going to do is they're going to whine, and then they're going to complain, and then they're going to cancel you, then they're going to lie about you, then they're going to smear you, then they're going to completely ignore everything that you're saying because now they smeared you, and so now they feel justified in ignoring you because you're just that crazy, insane person that said things they didn't want to hear, and they've smeared you all over the fucking media, and so they don't have to listen to you because now you're just a crazy person. And then a year after they do that, they figure out, oh, well, maybe we should have listened, but it's already too late because they've already done the damage by not listening in the fucking first place. That is the difference between Republicans and Democrats. That is why Democrats deserve to win and Republicans deserve to lose, because Democrats listen and they make adjustments and they think long term. Republicans and conservatives don't listen, cancel and smear, ostracize anyone they disagree with, and then even if they come around to the correct conclusion, probably a year or two later, they just pretend that they thought it up on their own and they piss everyone off in the meantime. That's why.
About it, or they didn't care about it, or they don't know anyone who's at risk, in their own social lives, because all these people are rich. Right. And it's just, to them, it's an abstraction, not a reality.
Exactly. I mean, there's the disconnect in terms of like the insane wealth that members of Congress are experiencing right now, while the majority of Americans are struggling economically.
Correct.
But also, I mean, the system is set up in a way to ensure that they're able to keep doing what they're doing, right? Like, I'm going to keep repeating this. The fact that they're able to be invested in individual stocks. I want to know how many members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, are personally, financially invested in corporate landlords.
And let us know how it goes.
I mean, these are publicly traded corporations. Are they invested in them? And I would be shocked if they weren't. So like, that's what I'm talking about when I say conflict of interest. They're looking out for their financial interests. And actually legislating on our behalf, representing the best interests of the American people, goes against their own profit motive. That's the problem. The system is set up this way.
It's very bleak. It's very bleak.
I know.
But
I know.
Exactly.
Should we read some books
Let's read some books.
Ease the pain? To help ease the pain. Well, if you want to ease the pain, you can join the Verso Book Club and get every new ebook that Verso publishes each month, as well as one or more books in the mail. All Verso Book Club members will also get 50% off everything on the website, including the Verso Comrade tote bag. For as long as you are a subscriber, all memberships are 50% off for your first 3.
Did you guys hear that? They're giving away a Comrade tote bag as part of their capitalist enterprise. And by the way, before anyone says it in the chat, they're allowed to be capitalists because they're not bourgeois capitalists. That's what it says in the Communist Manifesto.
Months. The Comrade tier is only $20 a month, and if you join in August, you get these 4 books: A World Without Police: How Strong Communities Make Cops Obsolete by Geo Mar; Investigative Aesthetics: Conflicts and Commons in the Politics of Truth by Matthew Fuller and Eyal Weizman; The Age of Precarity: Endless Crisis as an Art of Government by Dario Gentili; and a new edition of The Origin of the Family: Private Property and the State by friend of the show, Frederick Engels.
I should do a Comrade
new introduction by Jennifer Doyle.
I should do my own Comrade tote bag.
You know what? I mean, reading The Age of Precarity will definitely.
I'll have to work on that.
Like, definitely check that
out. That'll make you feel better.
No, I mean, but understanding, like, the thing that I like is reading about movements that have worked, right? And it gives you at least a bit of a playbook to understand how to proceed forward. I mean, I try to think of it that way, but it's still, things are tough. Things are definitely tough. All right. I'm looking for my decode segment, and for some reason I'm not seeing it. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
That's
funny, average person. Not good.
No. I have, like, I didn't print out, like, the first page, which is a bit of a disaster. Oh no, I got it. Okay, I'm ready.
Got it.
I'm ready. Let's do it. All right. So let's have some fun. Let's go to a music festival.
Or Anna.
As we speak, Chicago is hosting Lollapalooza, a massive music festival, despite the fact that, unfortunately, new cases of coronavirus are in fact spreading and spiking. The city's
Why aren't
largest
you
music
wearing a
festival
mask,
is being
Anna?
held at full capacity from July 29th to August 1st. It comes at a time when the city is seeing its average daily number of new coronavirus cases more than double in a matter of weeks. Now, for the purposes of this Decode segment, I'm not going to get into how frustrating the spread of the Delta variant is, but it is important to at least consider why a massive music festival will be held or is being held as the numbers of new cases is spiking.
Guys.
And it's because of
year-old.
Of course, the profit motive behind these music festivals. And so that got me thinking about the profit motive, but more importantly, something that's kind of been whitewashed in the media, the notion of millennials wanting to avoid spending money on things in order to spend their limited resources on experiences.
No one forces anyone to go to Lollapalooza.
It's part of this economy that economists, capitalists have been talking about for decades now. It's known as the experience economy. And when you really hone in on what makes the experience economy succeed and how it allows for capitalists to control our amusement, our entertainment, the more pleasurable parts in our lives, it can get incredibly infuriating because we should be able to control what we do or how we enjoy our free time. But when it comes to music festivals, as fun as they might seem, there have been some pretty massive hiccups. So in fact, that human desire for something that's been exploited and commodified by capitalists for profit is what's referred to as the experience economy. Here's a little more about it.
In the past 20 years.
Okay, I'm going to turn the volume down on this a little bit because people are still telling me they can't hear me. So we'll go with that. And no one has to go to Lollapalooza. No one is forcing anyone to go to Lollapalooza, for fuck's sake.
The Western world has shifted from buying things to buying these kinds of things. In other words, experiences.
My name is Joe Pine, and I'm going to tell you all about the experience economy.
Is this
Joe has written a book called, The Experience Economy.
Well, what's happened is we've gone from an agrarian economy based off commodities through an industrial economy based off goods to a service economy. And today we're in an experience economy. What experiences really do is that they engage everyone inside of them.
And it's all designed to create this unique communal experience.
Living in the digital age that we are now, there's more need than ever for people to connect. That's what festivals do the best.
I mean, it's ironic, isn't it? Because when you really take a step back and you look at what capitalism supports or endorses, which is individualism, while shunning collectivism.
Yes, correct.
Then they try to find ways to exploit the isolation or the alienation that we might feel as a result of the capitalist system, right? And to be sure,
someone can be an individual and go to a rock concert. What are you talking about? Is Anna Kasparian really arguing that people should never do things? Like, capitalism is bad because people put on music festivals to make money? Anna, what did you think of the people who started Woodstock? Who were not, by the way, on the right at all.
We're already feeling that alienation, that isolation, that atomized way of living prior to the pandemic, but the pandemic has only exacerbated that. So it's completely understandable that humans have this need, this desire for community. Those are the experiences that they crave, and it's only gotten worse. Or at least that urge has only become more pronounced in people's lives during coronavirus-related shutdowns and social distancing. Now, again, capitalism celebrates individualism while shunning collectivism. Workers feel alienation from other people because they're either seen as their competitors for scarce resources and wages, and it's also very easy for people to be alienated from others when they're constantly working and have very little time for rest or for pleasure or for communicating or connecting with others. In other words, capitalism leads to the alienation of workers, and then it finds ways to benefit from it and profit from it by offering so-called experiences. Now, the Harvard Business Review was already advising businesses on how to exploit alienated people looking for more meaning in their lives, looking for more community in their lives. In fact, they wrote, quote, "An experience occurs when a company intentionally uses services as the stage and goods as props to engage individual customers in a way that creates a memorable event. Commodities are fungible, goods tangible, services intangible, and experience."
Do socialists want to get rid of experiences now? Socialists want to eliminate all human I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? Socialists are trying to create this world that is absolutely devoid of humanity. They don't want people to have biological families. They don't want people to have their own biological children. They don't want people to have loyalties to anyone else that usurp loyalties to the state. So doesn't it actually make sense, and I'm saying this in a completely unironic way, doesn't it actually make sense that socialists would want to get rid of these experiences that can bond people together by creating memories and friendships and things like that? Wouldn't it make sense that they want to get rid of all these places where you can meet and befriend new people in your life because they want robots? Why else would Anna Kasparian be arguing to get rid of like music festivals? She doesn't really believe that this is like, ooh, the evils of capitalism trying to force a collectivized experience onto everyone. No one is forcing anyone else to go to a music festival. I myself have lived a life of 41 years without ever going to Lollapalooza. Very successfully. Never gone to Lollapalooza. But if you want to go to Lollapalooza, fine. But you don't have to.
Experiences, memorable. But do we really want the capitalist class to decide which experiences in our lives are memorable? Do we want them to tailor certain experiences for us to experience a sense of community? Now, music festivals are actually a great example of what the Harvard Business Review had written about, because the music is merely a prop. The experience, large masses of people letting loose together, is the experience.
A 10-year British audience survey revealed that headline acts are a deciding factor for only 8% of festival goers.
Right.
But 53% said the overall experience is the reason they bought their ticket. We asked these festival goers why they're here.
Hey! No, a lineup will drag me in, but when I'm here, sometimes I don't even see any music.
I'll be honest, I don't know any of the friggin' music.
It's fun.
Nothing to do with the music. It's all atmosphere.
It's something to do. It's fun.
Nothing to do with the music. It's all atmosphere. And
so
listen,
what?
That's fine. But let's understand what that atmosphere is about. It's about a sense of
Spending
togetherness, about celebrating something together with your fellow humans, something that we're not able to do on a day-to-day basis. Now, look, a good case study is actually Woodstock. The story of Woodstock in the summer of 1969, of course, has been rewritten and romanticized, which I didn't really know about until fairly recently. That myth was then capitalized in the 1990s when the same men behind the original Woodstock decided to create subsequent Woodstocks in 1999 and, by the way, 1994, which for the most part went off without a hitch. But we should focus a little bit on the 1999 Woodstock because it was a disaster.
Yeah.
Now, Woodstock 99 ended in riots as attendees whipped up by 3 days of anarchy-fueled music burned the fairgrounds. 44 were arrested. There were 10 reported sexual assaults, but a cursory glance at the footage, male attendees groping topless women with glee, assures there were many more. In fact, there's a fantastic documentary about this called Woodstock 99 on HBO. It's relatively new, and I highly recommend it. The facilities collapsed under the weight of 200,000 visitors. Over 1,200 were treated for medical conditions. 3 people actually died. Now, Woodstock 99 was riddled with the failures of capitalism, from its deceptive marketing to its price gouging. The marketing for Woodstock 99, again, relied on the romanticism and revised history of the original Woodstock in 1969. Although the concert became free when an expected crowd of 200,000 grew 500,000 strong, It was actually conceived as a business proposition. The 1969 Woodstock Music Festival was the brainchild of 4 men, all aged 27 or younger, looking for an investment opportunity.
All hippies.
John Roberts, Joel Rosenman, Artie Cornfield, and Michael Lang. Lang had organized the successful Miami Music Festival in 1968, and Cornfield was the youngest vice president at Capitol Records. Roberts and Rosenman were New York entrepreneurs involved in building a Manhattan recording studio. So we're talking about businessmen looking to put together a music festival for profit. But things didn't really work out the way that they intended. And as a result, there were literally hundreds of thousands of people who were able, and I think this is a good thing, to enjoy the music festival for free. But here's the problem. It wasn't really a feel-good time in a lot of cases, and this next video will explain why.
As one official pointed out, with 300,000 people, you are not dealing with just a crowd, but virtually a city. And as a city, it had city problems. One youngster died of a suspected overdose of heroin. 80 others were arrested on drug charges. Another boy killed when the driver of a tractor failed to see him inside a sleeping bag.
What happened at White Lake this weekend may have been more than an uncontrolled outpouring of hip young people, struggling as they did to survive. First, the 20-mile traffic jams, 5-mile hikes, then the intense heat and sudden rain, the thirst and hunger from the shortage of water and food, just for the opportunity to spend a few days in the country getting stoned on their drugs and grooving on the music.
Those evil drugs.
And grooving on the music. I love that news report. It was actually a pretty fair news report by CBS back in 1969, which you can check out on YouTube, and I highly recommend it. Now, the entrepreneurs behind the original Woodstock happen to be the exact same guys looking to make a buck off music festivals and merchandising today. Woodstock Ventures, the firm that oversees the licensing and intellectual property related to the Woodstock Festival, is still run by the original producers of the event. And for several decades now, that once ragtag group of hippies has evolved into, if they weren't already, good businessmen with savvy instincts. Now, that's an older Reuters piece, and to be clear, their instincts ain't so savvy, especially when you're putting festivals together with the very clear financial interest. They want to make a profit off of these events. And as we know, the best way to make a profit is to minimize costs and maximize the profits. So one can understand why they would want to rewrite history, or the history of Woodstock, because Woodstock Ventures also happens to be the same group of guys behind Woodstock 94 and 99. So they made a bunch of dumb decisions with Woodstock 99 by choosing a military base in the middle of the summer as the venue for the event. Take a look.
Woodstock 99 was held on Griffiths Air Force Base.
I'm really not sure what her
Constructed
point is,
in the 1940s, the base was used for military aircraft maintenance. There were some areas of turf, but for the most part, Woodstock 99 happened on 1,100 acres of airplane runways. The grounds were so expansive, visitors had to travel 1.5 miles between 2 main stages. This is how Rolling Stone journalist Rob Sheffield described the scene. It was a few miles of asphalt surrounded by barbed wire. There were a few patches of grass, but for instance, if you were looking for some grass to lie down on, you're not going to lie under a tree or on a hillside. You're not going to see any flowers. It was a place that was designed to house jet fighters. Kevin Wasserman, the Offspring's lead guitarist, you know him as Noodles, was even more critical of the locale. We played this festival in Nuremberg at an old Third Reich park. So I've played a venue that was literally built by Hitler, that was more hospitable than that Air Force base was.
But the event's organizers were giddy once they secured that military base as the venue for, ironically, Woodstock 99.
Here is the argument that Anna let that irony sink in. Here is the argument that Anna is making. Business people make bad decisions sometimes, and therefore all capitalism is bad. That makes no sense. Businesses are run by people. People sometimes are going to make less than perfect decisions. It happens every single day. That does not mean that capitalism is inherently bad. If you don't want to patronize a business, no one is forcing you to. No one forced anyone to go to Woodstock. No one forced anyone to go to Lollapalooza. No one is forcing this. You are not going to be outcast from society because you don't go to Woodstock. I mean, if anything, Anna is actually pushing more of this mindset than anything else. Anna is making it seem that in order to be part of the cool kids club, you just have to go to these music festivals. You just have to. There's no other way around it. Why? Why isn't Anna Kasparian's message saying, you know what? These festivals are really shittily run and they're not as great as you think they're going to be. So maybe save the thousands of dollars that you would spend going to them and do something else instead. Go to the beach. Go to a national park. Go someplace where there aren't people. Go hang out. Go rent a nice Airbnb somewhere on like a gorgeous mountaintop. There are any number of suggestions that Anna Kasparian could be giving people if she doesn't want them to go to music festivals of other things they can do. But she doesn't want to do that because it's not indicative to her argument.
For a second. Why were they so giddy about it? Well, if you're doing this music festival on a military base, then you have this infrastructure at your disposal that can prevent people from sneaking into the concert for free. They weren't going to let that original mistake of Woodstock, at 69 happen again. They wanted to ensure that everyone who was there paid the ticket to be there. And so, of course, you're dealing with asphalt in the middle of summer in Rome, New York. Temperatures are extremely high at 100 degrees, and asphalt increases the ground temperature. People were incredibly hot and grumpy as a result. And by the way, speaking of tickets for Woodstock 99, remember, this is 1999, sold for $150 and ballooned to $180 on the weekend. A single serving of pizza, meaning a slice of pizza, was $12. And guess what? The situation wasn't any better when it came to bottled water. Water sold for $4 a bottle. Unfortunately, free tap water was incredibly hard to come by as well.
Imagine around 250,000 people trapped in a concrete pen surrounded by barbed wire. Now imagine shutting off that population's water supply. Unless you were working the festival, that was your life for 4 straight days. Of course, festival attendees had 2 choices. They could either buy a 12-ounce bottle of water for $4, $6.20 if you adjust for inflation, or stand in line for free faucet water from spigots that were sparsely located up to a half-mile away from the main stages. The wait in these lines took hours. Eventually, people got frustrated by their shabby water conditions and started destroying the water spigots, their only free source of water.
Sounds to me like they made a
so
pretty
imagine being in that
then,
environment, right? The conditions on the ground, you're hot, you're dehydrated, you're being price gouged left and right when it comes to sustenance and hydration.
Right. They did
and
that.
When violence finally did break out, at this concert or this music festival, some concert goers said the violence was directed at the high prices promoters charge for food, water, and merchandise, which is completely understandable. I mean, I'm not recommending violence, but when violence breaks out in response to that price gouging, in response to the horrible conditions on the ground, organizers should probably take a little responsibility for it. Now, believe it or not, it actually gets worse. The organizers of the festival skimped on security and also hired inexperienced randos who walked off on the job when things started to get a little sketchy. So even though the crowd wildly outnumbered the law enforcement presence, roughly 500 New York State troopers plus local PD, the authorities were supposed to have a little more support courtesy of volunteer security recruited from New York City. Volunteer meaning unpaid. However, many of those volunteers unceremoniously walked off the job by wandering off into the audience, leaving the police severely shorthanded when things got out of hand. So these event organizers who are putting this whole thing together for profit wanted to cut costs by refusing to hire professional security or refusing to pay actual state troopers or enough of those state troopers to do the job appropriately. They wanted to rely on free labor, and they paid the price for that. The organizers also didn't invest enough on the pumping out porta potties, which is incredibly uncomfortable thing to talk about, but it's relevant. So there were at least 2,500 portable toilets acquired for Woodstock 99, but they began to overflow by the second day. The excess waste combined with dirt and spigot water to create a bacteria-infested cesspool that stretched the length of the grounds. But you know what? You think that's bad? It gets worse. It gets worse. So kids were complaining that sewage from overflowing toilets was going into their tents. They were sleeping in it. They couldn't believe that really was what they were expected to live with. By the end of the festival, at least 1,200 tons of solid waste and 500,000 gallons of liquid waste were produced by concert goers. In fact, if you look at photos of the event, you'll see people who didn't realize that the mud wasn't really mud, it was raw sewage, just completely covered in that mud, covered in that raw sewage. I can't even imagine what that smelled like. Now, the conditions on the ground were miserable. People were hot. They were dehydrated. They were covered in literal shit. And the lineup of mostly new metal music also didn't help to calm the furious festival goers. The reboot of Woodstock for an audience mostly born after
capitalism in Aaron Kasparian's world, like, okay, let me start again. Socialism requires people to abdicate personal responsibility. There is a reason that Anna Kasparian is going on and on and on and on and on about a music festival that took place 22 years prior to this being released on YouTube. This is in July of 2021. Woodstock of 1999 was in 1999. Anna Kasparian is bitching and complaining about something that happened 22 years ago that no one was required to go to, that no one was required to stay at. And she's doing this because she really wants to convince people that individuals have no agency at all. The only way that socialists can be successful in winning in America is if individuals make the choice to abdicate all personal responsibility. Emphasize says, sounds like a Gallagher mosh pit. Indeed, Emphasize, it does. All right, guys, please mount that like button for me. You are watching Socialism Saturday. We do this every Saturday, mostly at 6 p.m.
The original festival in 1969 was a proto-fire meltdown of grotesque American excess, a panoply of late 90s nonsense.
Oh my God, she's literally blaming Woodstock 99 on the fact that they had too many white male musicians that played music she doesn't like. Wow. Dragonwater, am I the only one who thinks Anna sounded happy about talking about people being covered in poop? She does seem to be reveling in it, doesn't she? I am pointing out the inconsistencies of her arguments. Perhaps you should work on pointing out the inconsistencies of her arguments as well. Not even the inconsistencies. I completely misphrased that. Let me rephrase. I am pointing out the thought process behind what she's saying. That's much better. You're welcome to do the same thing in the chat, or you're welcome to whine, but just as a reminder, guys, I have 2 rules in my chat. 1, don't be a dick. That means you don't insult me, you don't insult other people in the chat. 2, no whining. If you end up whining all night in my chat, I promise you, you won't be here for very long.
Kid Rock strolling on stage in a white fur coat, Limp Bizkit as a main draw, mostly young white male Gen Xers paying to see new metal acts in a poorly managed swamp of filth. So they rioted.
It was the white man's fault that they rioted. Oh, do it, Pot. Hold it in.
Keep on going.
The
the crowds are blowing up CO2 tanks from the tractor trailers. They got the troops in there with riot gear. They're forcing everybody out. Mass chaos.
I mean, a lot of people, I think, are frustrated at the whole profit thing of this, but there's a different way to show it.
I was this close to going to Woodstock 99.
One of the things that happened in the aftermath of this disastrous music festival was the organizers, the investors, the very people who put this literal shit show together, tried to blame the performers for the riot. I mean, the music, to be sure, it's new metal music. I mean, it is what it is. But they hired people like Limp Bizkit to do what Limp Bizkit does, right? They knew what his music was about. They knew what his performances looked like. And they tried to pass the blame on Limp Bizkit and his performance for what started the rioting. No. And this is true of other instances where something goes wrong in a company, where something goes wrong in a bank, like Wells Fargo, for instance.
Oh my God.
The workers are the scapegoats, not the investors, not the executives. It's the workers. And
this is a really good point, Ken. Thank you for posting this. Socialism is an equal sharing of misery. Capitalism is an unequal sharing of wealth. What great insight. And now Anna's trying to say that, like, again, in businesses, people make bad decisions. There were so many bad decisions made about Woodstock 99. So many bad decisions. But just because men, well, business people, we won't gender it. Just because business people make bad decisions does not mean that capitalism is inherently bad. It means that human beings are imperfect. Ken says Anna is proposing to take over what the capitalists do, supposedly, and she wants to be in charge of telling you what's fun and what you should be able to experience. Nice one-size-fits-all. That's exactly right, Ken. I agree with you there. I mean, that's what they all want, isn't it? And again, for socialism to succeed, we need to abdicate our personal responsibility. That's the only way these people can really win. And they are winning because enough people are abdicating their personal responsibility. But if we refuse to abdicate our personal responsibility, then these people can never win. So it really is up to like every individual person as a collective, even Anna.
In this case, regardless of how you feel about the performers, regardless of how you feel about Limp Bizkit or his music, he's a worker in this case. He is working this music festival. And the capitalists behind it decide to try to throw him under the bus because they didn't want to take any blame for all of the horrible decisions they made all around in organizing this
marginalized
event.
Worker.
And really, this isn't just about Woodstock 99. It isn't about introducing more regulation to ensure that all of the issues that we see in this particular event are prevented in the future. Really, what we need to do is think about how workers can take control of not just their working conditions, but of their lives. Because if workers had a seat at the table, or if workers had control and power over their working conditions,
they can start their own
they wouldn't
business.
see others as competition for scarce resources. They wouldn't be as alienated as we are now from everything, including the work we do, including alienation from nature, because under a capitalist.
Do you guys remember a few years ago when the Young Turks workers tried to unionize? What happened? Does anyone remember this? What happened a couple years ago when the employees at the Young Turks tried to form a union? I remember this because I covered it on my channel. Does anyone else remember what happened? Yes, Cenk lost his shit. Cenk did not allow that to happen. He lost his shit. Anna, why do you still work for the Young Turks if you just want the workers to rise up and advocate for themselves? Because it seems to me that they tried to, at the establishment that you work at and are a very high-profile person representing, and Cenk shut that shit down so quickly and threatened to fire everyone involved. They are going to show Cornel West, but they haven't done it yet, so I don't know when we're getting to that. They're just not there yet.
System. Nature is just seen as something to exploit and extract natural resources from, right? We would see the world differently because there would be more to our lives than just producing profit for our bosses. And we would have more control over how much free time we have and what we do with that free time. We wouldn't have to rely on these music festivals or any other event that's put together by people who have a profit motive in order to feel connection to others. We would have the ability to, put some time aside to learn a musical instrument and maybe engage in a jam session if that's what we're interested in. And so we can actually enjoy the music without having corporate control of that experience. And so, yes, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to
a little bit of a
be
Debbie
super
Downer,
negative
Anna.
toward some of these events that you guys might actually be in favor of. And that's totally fine. But what
you are indeed being a Debbie Downer. You don't want people to go to concerts. You don't want people to take responsibility for what they spend their money on. Everything is to blame for the evil white men. Emphasize says, teaching youth to defy their parents' advice about working and saving money to profit from said defiance. Now it's OnlyFans and Balenciaga. Well, I don't know that I agree with you, Emphasize, but I appreciate the super chat. Multi-Drider says, a silver lining to social media is exposing hypocrisy, like with the young turds and chunk yogurt not unionizing. I'm sure they also got private jets. Yeah, that's probably true. Capitalism for thee, but not for me.
What I am arguing is that we need to have more control over our free time, how we use that free time, and not allow for others to cater to us in a way that might seem like it's tailored to our needs or our concerns. But more importantly, we need to have more control so people with a profit motive aren't making those decisions for us. And of course, even when it comes to the perfectly fine looking music festivals, Anna, they cost a lot of money to go to. What does that say for people who can't afford to go to these events?
That they don't have
What does
to
that
go.
say for people who want to have a sense of community but literally can't afford to
They can
do it
something else.
Because they're underpaid due to the decisions that their bosses make?
No.
So the real solution here, Nando, as you know, is for workers to have more control over their workplaces and their lives.
Well, I think the real solution is just because I've just your segment moved me because it was a socialist defense of Limp Bizkit, and I will admit to when I was a young lad at 14 in 1999, I had the Limp Bizkit album. I had the album. I listened to it, and now I feel better about myself because I recognize that Fred Durst, singer of Limp Bizkit, is a worker, and actually, he deserves all the protections that every other worker deserves. So I want to thank you for that, because I think now the solution should be to make him the the vice premier of the Politburo of the new workers of the new worker state.
I didn't say all that. But but it is kind of funny how it's like, they made all these decisions to price gouge the hell out of people, hold this event at a military base in scorching temperatures. And then it's like, no, it's Limp Bizkit's fault that they rioted. It's Limp Bizkit. Come on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I haven't seen the documentary yet, but I remember that festival well.
Does Anna Kasparian have
that
any
time really well.
principles, do you guys think?
I was kind of like
Is she
really
just
into music
is she just a
throughout
grifter?
the 90s.
I'm honestly asking.
I remember Woodstock
watch her
94
enough.
really well, which was also kind of a mess, and there was a huge mudslide, and there was like a whole issue with Green Day. It was like a whole thing also, and they just kind of tried to recapture the magic of Woodstock 1969, which was a completely different era, both politically, but also was before kind of neoliberalism turned everything into like a profit machine, like literally every aspect of society. And by 1999, when neoliberalism was at its absolute peak in terms of its hegemony, they just do like this just grotesque profit grab, and it backfires like right in their face. I find it to be kind of poetic in a way.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And, they were planning on doing another one of these Woodstock festivals, and they announced it in 2019. So I think it was supposed to be held in 2020. It didn't work out. And I don't know, I guess it's one of the silver linings to the pandemic.
Yeah. Do you enjoy going to music festivals in general?
The last time I went to a music festival was in 2014. I did go to Coachella, and I have to admit, I had the time of my life. I did.
Exactly, Anna.
So it's not like, oh, I'm not condemning music festivals. I just think that when you allow people with a profit motive to control everything about it, if it started off good, it's easy for it to devolve. And to be short, Coachella has devolved quite a bit. I mean, that's why the last time I went was in 2013 or 2014. I can't remember.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how expensive they are. It's amazing how they profit like at every single turn.
Don't go.
The case of the water. I mean, this happens in like nightclubs as well, where like everyone's like hopped up on ecstasy and they get dry mouth, and then they just like jack up the prices of the water bottles. And in Spain, actually, like back in the day in the 90s, they used to turn off the water in the bathrooms, like in the sinks. They don't do that anymore because there was like some sort of like intervention from the government. They used to like at these big nightclubs, they would turn off the water in order to force you to buy these like insanely expensive bottles of water when you're like hopped up on E and you got all the dry mouth. So yeah,
that's insane. It shows you though, like they know that you can die. They know that people are hopped up on E, right? They know that people can literally die if they don't have access to water, and they're like, no, we got to make money off of it. We got to exploit the possibility of these people dying to make a buck.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, yeah. All righty. Well, should I get to my segment?
Yes. Tell me what the FBI has been up to, Nando.
Well, a good rule of thumb, Anna, is that you should not trust the FBI. Do not trust the FBI ever.
That's actually correct.
2020 was a pretty tumultuous year, to say the least.
That's correct.
There was, of course, the coronavirus pandemic that froze the global economy for about a year. There was the uprising after the murder of George Floyd, one of the largest mass protests in American history. And then, of course, there was the rise of right-wing militia violence, which culminated with the storming of the Capitol on January 6th. Now, one of the most shocking examples of what is now being called domestic terrorism was when a group of militiamen were arrested in Michigan for allegedly trying to kidnap the governor, Gretchen Whitmer, after she implemented lockdowns in her state.
They were in trouble.
We're going to begin tonight with that alleged terror plot and the chilling plan. The FBI says it stopped before it could be carried out. A plan to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and then what they were planning to do to her. 13 suspects arrested, including 7 alleged members of a right-wing militia group. The FBI and state authorities conducting a series of raids in Michigan.
Exactly.
Those 13 suspects taken into custody, 7 of them alleged members of that right-wing militia group. Governor Whitmer has been the target of protests since last spring over restrictions aimed to stop the spread of COVID amid one of the early outbreaks. Michigan, of course, a hot spot at the time.
Now, that came in October of 2020, just a few months after armed right-wing protesters entered the Michigan state capitol and occupied it.
Lawmakers in Michigan are taking extra precautions today after the Capitol building was overrun by protesters, some of whom were armed with semi-automatic weapons.
Now, these two events
protesters, how dare they,
freak people out. But in the months since the arrests, information has come to light that casts serious doubt on the narrative that came out of the FBI and the media. The attorney for at least one of the defendants is alleging that the FBI actually entrapped these men, encouraging and helping them to hatch this conspiracy.
Remember, this is in July of 2021.
Members of a group called the Wolverine Watchmen. They responded at anti-lockdown protests at Michigan's Capitol last year, now looking at felony charges of conspiracy to kidnap. But a motion recently filed by defendant Caleb Franks is raising questions around the case. It alleges that the government was working with 12 different confidential sources within the group. His attorney now requesting all information on those informants from the government to better prepare for trial.
Weren't they acquitted?
Now, of course, the defense attorney is going to try anything to get his client off, but a deeply reported investigation by BuzzFeed News that came out this week seems to corroborate the narrative. It writes, quote, an examination of the case by BuzzFeed News also reveals that some of these informants, acting under the direction of the FBI, played a far larger role than has previously been reported. Working in secret, they did more than just passively observe and report on the actions of the suspects. Instead, they had a hand in nearly every aspect of the alleged plot, starting with its inception. The extent of their involvement raises serious questions as to whether there would have even been a conspiracy without them. Now you play the video, Kale.
The recent filing also outlines potentially problematic relationships between confidential informants and the FBI, saying,
does anyone have a problem if I fast forward through this bit and we get to the Cornel West interview? I didn't realize that this was a show where they talked and complained about the news before they actually did the thing that they said they were going to do. So that's my fault. I should have looked into it. But if anyone really wants to like watch this, we can, I guess. But like, I would rather get to the Cornel West interview. I can fast forward. All right, we're going to fast forward. I apologize, guys. I didn't realize. Oh, now they're talking about it again. Okay. All right. I want to listen to the part where they're having a conversation. I just want to listen to the news recap. I just want to hear them talk about it.
We should watch for the predictable effects of playing up fears of terrorism, whether foreign or domestic. It never ends well.
What I hate is that this just provides more fodder for conspiracy theorists and stuff, right? Like, and people who don't trust our institutions because they have good reason to not trust institutions. And so it's so counterproductive. It's awful. I mean, yes, there are the ramifications that you perfectly outlined regarding, you know, the security state, more surveillance, more interference in our day-to-day lives that violate our privacy rights and all of that, our civil liberties. But then there's also a huge, I mean, it's all interconnected, right? When you look at the more insane conspiracy theorists or theories that are out there, or like QAnon's a good example, I think, right?
Oh God.
It's so hard to counter that with evidence because they don't trust the institutions that are trying to provide evidence counter to what they believe. So it's just, it keeps getting worse. And I don't know what the solution is really. Because are we going to stop the FBI from doing what the FBI does? But if the FBI wanted to keep an eye on things because there's a group of people who might be on their own planning some sort of terrorist threat in the US, that makes sense. But planting a seed or literally like planning the plot themselves and then shifting that blame onto any group of people is not what the FBI is supposed to be doing. That doesn't keep anyone safe. What it does is it makes it appear as though they're doing their jobs and they're effective at it. I think that's part of what motivates them. But also, yes, I think it provides the excuse to violate civil liberties and encroach on our freedoms.
Yeah, I mean, it's not dissimilar to when you see kind of news happening around the world that kind of benefits the national security state that comes from sources in the national security state that are like,
does she ever need critical
a good example is one that
theory?
we
You're
always
right
talk about.
that.
It's kind of like our hobby horse, which is the Russian bounty in Afghanistan.
It would do her a world of good. Her and Deb.
Can you believe this? Can you believe this? And like, obviously, all the sourcing was just like, you know, high level people
QAnon
in the Pentagon
and
stuff like that.
We are
and it's
not
like,
going
this
to
is so
validate
obviously
QAnon insanity on my channel.
QAnon
is a conspiracy
like a plant
theory.
into the media in order
crazy.
to justify, you know, our staying in Afghanistan, to justify, you know, whatever belligerence towards Russia, and like a million things that kind of benefit the national security state.
No offense,
and then the media is just like, whoa, wow, look, this is happening. We just run with it, and then people like read it, and then they believe it. You know, like that's what drives me crazy about all of this stuff is that like we should never trust government sources. Like they're self-interested just like anyone else. But the media is very, very obsequious towards government sources. They especially like the cable news and all these. It's just like if the government is saying it, they believe it wholesale, and you just can't believe it. You just can't believe it.
Well, yeah, and I going back to the point about everything being connected. Why does the media just believe what government sources have to say, rather than being incredibly skeptical of their sources? Well, it goes back to the profit motive behind media, which is why the fairness doctrine was so incredibly important, right? They want access to these sources because access to these sources definitely plays a role in the reporting. They're able to say, oh, we got the scoop, right? And that allows them to increase the readership or the viewership of their content and make a profit. Like it always goes back to the profit motive. So, and yeah, they don't want to destroy their contacts or their relationship with these sources. And so they'll do this like incredibly weak, flimsy reporting that carries out manufactured narratives that manufacture the consent for wars that we shouldn't be engaged in.
Yeah, no, and in the case of this latest stuff coming out of the from the FBI and all these right-wing groups, you know, again, it's not dissimilar to like radical Islamic terrorism or whatever. Like there is like a seed, a seed of truth there.
Ken.
Like it's not like completely just a total fiction. You know, like there are right-wing,
helped Republicans
very dangerous militia groups out there.
Because it was a psyop.
Not people that I want to be around, or, you know.
Possibly perpetrated by the goddamn intelligence agency.
You know, like you have to try as best you can to have a little perspective on it. Because when it becomes this kind of big media frenzy, then the response is always like, well, we got to do something about it. And the tools available to do something about it are always the same. They're just an expansion of the security state's power. It's just that like I remember like talking to Bessner about it like the day after the January 6th thing happened, and he was like, you know, this is what's going to happen. You know, like it is like this is what happened. You know, like because we have so much historical precedent to lean on. It's just the same thing over and over again. It's much like when you hear about like some media story about some attack on American soldiers and abroad, like, you know, whether it was the Gulf of Tonkin or whether it was like a million other things where, you know, it's just used as a casus belli to go to war. And you got to question those things, because over time, what always ends up coming out is that these things were exaggerated, or they didn't happen, or they were
exactly
by the military itself. I mean, that's just
we can't trust the government, but we need more government to make sure we can trust the government. Exactly.
Of January 6th, which like
it never seems to go in the other direction, does it?
It was so obvious that something was going to happen. I mean, they were like talking about it openly on Facebook and on social media in the weeks leading up to it, and yet they did nothing about it. They did, you know, it was just allowed to happen. And, you know, again, you look at it's like
Vincent,
that like scene Lebowski, you know,
brain.
It's like Lenin said,
we all
you ask who benefits, cui bono or whatever. And all of a sudden the Capitol Police is getting increased funding and, you know, vast sweeping powers to do this like national anti-terrorism police force. And by the way,
you want my side or Adam's side?
Great. Ken Klippenstein can't even like
tell me your loyalties, Nuclear. I know you have a wrench on his
mean,
channel.
Look, I think the January 6th situation it's frustrating.
I'll give you a wrench if you defect my channel.
They're obviously not organized and don't really have a real strategy or plan in place, but their motives were clear and what they were attempting to do was clear. And had they gotten to the same room that lawmakers were in, who knows what would have happened, right?
You're gonna defect Mark
so there's that. But at the same time, you know, yes, deal with people who have broken the law, sure. But more importantly, on the day that happened, right before the riots,
now you have Mark Robichaud.
Congressman Mo Brooks, you know, giving a speech partially inciting what happened. And, you know, he was interviewed by the Slate and he stupidly admitted that he was wearing a bulletproof vest. He was wearing body armor. Why were you wearing body armor unless you were expecting violence to break out? And if you were expecting violence to break out, why did you give the kind of speech that you did? You get what I'm So like, I bring that up because I want people in positions of power to be held accountable for what they did, for their encouragement of what happened in the Capitol that day. And right now, you know, we keep hearing about this select committee to investigate what happened. They're so hyper-focused on the perpetrators, like the people who stormed the Capitol. But there's very little conversation about the lawmakers who lied to the American people for weeks leading up to that, right? Lying to the American people about what actually happened or transpired in the 2020 election.
I don't understand it.
Some of those people are involved in the investigation. How insane is that? Like the whole thing is insane. And so for anyone who wants like justice or more importantly, like justice is one thing. I just don't want it to happen again. Right?
Yeah.
But if if you want to
the same
prevent
thing
that
be
from
said
happening
about
again,
Woodstock,
you need to
Anna?
get to the heart of the issue. And I don't see anyone in Congress focused on that at all.
No, they're not. And like you said, I mean, like, you know, the QAnon shaman is a patsy. Like, he's just such an obvious dumbass, you know? And all these people, like a bunch of people are going to go to jail and whatever. They're, you know, they're awful people, whatever. But the actual root causes are not going to be addressed. And then the effects, the long-term effects, are going to be incredibly negative. I mean, it's the same. It's a version of what happened after 9/11. You know, like, obviously what happened after 9/11 was much graver, but it's a version of the same exact dynamic, in which, like, we were just focused on the wrong thing. We were just absolutely focused on the wrong thing. We were not focused on the root causes, and then our response to it was insanely overblown and not addressing any of the root causes. Instead, focusing the brunt of it on innocent people, on, you know, and expanding the state's power to do all kinds of previously illegal stuff, while also doing a lot of currently illegal stuff, but then not prosecuting the state on any of that stuff, whether it was torture or, you know, illegal rendition or things like that. And so
this is why I get so confused by this type of socialist, in that they have some sense that the government is bad, and yet they believe that if we just create more government and we get rid of private property and we make everyone beholden to the government, then somehow the bad government that created the FBI, that created the CIA, that do all manner of nefarious shit, if we just create more of that, suddenly government will become good and altruistic and have positive motives. But it's so crazy. It's like they do have some semblance that, like, there's something bad about the government, but they go and create a whole wacky fantasy about more government being the solution to bad government.
Versions of like that are going to happen because these people are so obviously unsavory. I mean, if you watch the video of these like right-wing militia guys, like, they're insane. They're insane, and they're awful. I hate that. You know, like, but they're such an easy thing to serve up, you know, and we're like, it's so tempting for us to lap it up. To like, oh yeah,
they want to be the government. Exactly.
Like,
Blackwell Disco.
Guys, you know, like, do whatever it takes, you know, like, get those guys out of here. But like, we have to try to exhibit a little bit of self-control and caution and be like, what's really going on here? Who benefits? You know, what are the root causes, and what are the likely predictable effects?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that there was a way to focus on actual content. When I talk about holding people accountable in regard to January 6th, I'm talking about the politicians who did this, right? Who like just nonstop provocative speeches, nonstop lies, you know, encouraging them to do what they did. There's no conversation about consequences for them. In fact, the only time they're part of the conversation is, well, are they going to be good team players in investigating the Capitol riots? Why do you want the people who provoked the Capitol riots to be part of the investigation in the Capitol riots? Like, it just makes no sense. And that's honestly part of the problem with the Democratic Party. Right? Like, Nancy Pelosi putting like Liz Cheney on the select committee. She was one of the people that Pelosi appointed, and like bragging about how this is going to be a bipartisan effort, everyone. We wouldn't want this to appear political. No, but the whole point of the select committee, in the way that it's being carried out, is only political. It's not really about getting to the bottom of everything. And that's frustrating for someone who actually wants the very people in positions of power to be held accountable for what they did.
Yeah.
I'm going to fast forward in a minute.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, you know, let's lighten the mood a little bit. Hear from a very wise person, Dr. Cornel West, who we interviewed earlier in the week. So we're going to go to the interview in just a minute. But for those of you watching live, I just want to encourage you to send in your super chats, because we're going to save a few minutes toward the end of the show to answer your questions, read your comments. So as you're watching, maybe you have some feedback on the interview itself, feel free to send us super chats and we'll respond to them when we come back in about, I think, 45 minutes. So we'll see you then. Joining us now is Dr. Cornel West, someone who we've been really looking forward to having a conversation with, especially post the 2020 election. Dr. West, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I salute both of you, and I especially salute Jacobin Magazine, best leftist magazine out there. But you know, we do begin on a very sad note with the death of Bob Moses, one of the great freedom fighters of the 60s all the way into the 21st century. Glenn Ford.
Is his sound okay for people? He seems a little soft to me. Let me know.
One of the great journalists, really builds on the legacy of Ida B. Wells more than most others. And then also near death is Don Shriver, who was a giant in theological education, who facilitated James Cone, the founder of Black Liberation Theology at Union Theological Seminary. And even my new chair.
If you guys want to express your capitalism and send me super chats, that'd be pretty great.
Made the
just to play off Anna's thing. You don't have to though, it's fine. I will read all super chats.
Gone and near gone is a heavy, very heavy moment. At least for me, I'm sure for you all.
Yeah,
as well.
I think his volume's a little low.
Yeah, you know, as you say that, it just goes perfectly with the question that I've been really desperate to ask you, because I'm struggling right now in terms of where the left is post 2020 election. You know, you talk about these great leaders and how they're no longer with us. And sometimes things can feel a little hopeless. And so I wanted to ask you, you know, you've always had this sense of optimism, and I think it's a huge part of who you are. It's a huge part of your fight.
Blackwell,
where do you find that hope from?
I appreciate it.
I appreciate the question. Well, I mean, as a blues man in the life of the mind and jazz man in the world of ideas, I've never been either a pessimist or an optimist. I'm a prisoner of hope. And hope is as much a verb as it is a virtue. And therefore, very much like Jacobin Magazine, I have to stay in motion. I can't be a spectator. I've got to be a participant, engaged in movement, motion, momentum, organizing, as well as the reading, reflecting, and writing. And as long as you're in the funk and in the mess of the movement, then the hope is found in seeing people refusing to give up, seeing people fight, seeing people serve others, seeing people sacrifice for something bigger than them.
Thank you,
and as long as you're part of that motion and movement, that's where the hope is found. So in that sense, hope is as much an effect of action, probably more than it is a cause of action in that regard. I mean, for me, you know, I don't even believe so much in the language of hope. You know, it's just a matter of trying to be a hope. And if you are a hope, you don't talk about hope. You know, hope's too abstract. It's too abstract. If your hope in the fleshified sense, the concretized sense, the actualized sense of being part of movements, organizing, mobilizing, then you're forever able to move with others in solidarity here and around the world, oppressed people and everything.
You know, you might not like Cornel West, but he's not actually wrong on the point he's making right now, which is like, when things look grim, when you feel like you're losing, you got to keep working. You got to get out there. You got to do stuff. This is where the right loses time and time and time and time and time again. Where when it doesn't work out for them, what happens is they embrace this victim mentality. They start to develop like a learned hopelessness about the situation. They're like, everyone's against us. Our votes don't count. No one listens to us. We're censored everywhere. Boo hoo hoo. Woe is us. And then they don't do anything. And they come up with every excuse they can to not do anything. But these guys, for all their faults, they're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to get out there and try. That's the difference between the right and the left. One of them keeps going, keeps pushing, and knows it's a battle of inches that they have to fight every single day to get that next inch. And if they get kicked back, then they got to fight their way back up. They got to do something, not see themselves as victims of the situation. But the right's like, everyone hates us and it's worthless and I don't even know why we're trying. That's why the right loses to the left every single time. Dragon Water, you have to keep moving into a new season. That's right. And if you don't keep moving, then don't be surprised when someone gets ahead of you.
Quarter of the globe who are fighting. And you look in their eyes, you look in their hearts, you look in their minds, you see that sparkle, you see that fire, you see that strength, and you say, shoot, I got to keep on moving. I have to be part of this. But keep in mind, last but not least, Goethe says, he who has never despaired has never lived. And there is no hope without despair. We're wrestling with despair all the time. That's a sign that we're sensitive to suffering. That's a sign that we're trying to reflect on the suffering, to try to alleviate the suffering with our social analysis and with our social practice.
Yeah, it's to me, what I always appreciate about hearing you speak on any show or any platform or read your work is that you constantly tie it to something bigger, a bigger struggle. And I find that that's what really gives life meaning, is to surrender yourself to a struggle that is bigger than yourself, which is something that's very difficult in the modern time.
Thank you, Gordy. I appreciate
everything
it.
is catered to our own personal whims in the moment, as a consumer. And it really negates our ability to attach ourselves to something that's bigger than ourselves. And to me, the thing that really provides that for me is to be able to zoom back and look at things with a perspective of history. And we live in a moment of one of the most bitter defeats for the left.
Right.
But often in those defeats in the past, there has been a sort of darkness before the light moment. I would like to hear your thoughts as to where we are. The Bernie Sanders campaigns of 2016 and 2020 were unimaginable 10 years before, or even 4 years before. And now that seems like it has opened some avenues of possibility that were denied to us in the dark period of the early 2000s or the 90s or things like that. Where are you thinking right now in terms of where we are?
I appreciate that. One just brief point though about transcendence, trying to be connected to something bigger than us. Rabbi Heschel used to say that we've got to be connected to something that calls us to serve and sacrifice that's larger than us.
Yeah.
But the problem is the market has colonized the dominant forms of transcendence. So we've got careers, opportunism, just market-driven conception of transcendence. So that success, financial prosperity, status, spectacle, celebrity, all those are market forms of colonizing transcendence. And leftists in all of our varieties, we're calling for non-Marxist forms of transcendence. It could be moral, it could be spiritual, it could be political. It's something bigger than us.
Is he really saying that leftists are calling for the greater collective
democracy,
good?
Equality. And the only way you can come.
I really want people to hear this. I don't agree with his premise, but what I want people to honestly hear is that this is someone who has spent his entire life fighting for what he truly believes is the greater spiritual good of humanity. That's what they believe they're fighting for with their socialist revolution. That's why you can't use logic with these people. Because the greater spiritual good of humanity will always trump whatever argument you try to give them.
That is to sustain different networks, different matrices, different organizations and structures that are countervailing forces against the market-driven forms of transcendence. And that's true for just market-driven forms of universities, market-driven forms of civic institutions, and so forth. So that becomes a launching pad into looking at the grimness of our own moment. because it's true
Yes.
that, I mean, my God, just
That's why they believe the
12
ends
months
justify
ago,
the
we had
means.
hundreds of
Exactly.
thousands of people on the street with Black Lives Matter. And that is inseparable from Bernie Sanders' campaign, going back to Occupy, feminist movements highlighting the Me Tooism, anti-homophobic movements, bringing to bear the kind of dignity for the gay brothers and lesbian sisters and queers and trans and non-binary precious folk, so that the voices are still there. It's just that the imperial structure, but the empire is just so decadent.
Mm-hmm.
And the wonderful piece that I read on the ruling class by our dear brother, was it Doug, was it?
Doug Henwood.
Yeah, I highly recommend folk to read that. And you can just see the level of decay of the ruling class.
Gordy is making a great point.
So that it's just the outright.
Gordy, excellent, excellent, excellent. Logic won't work on grifters either because their income depends on not understanding the logic. That is exactly right. And this is something, again, because I see conservatives say this all the time, not even just conservatives, like people who don't agree with like the woke or like the far left ideology. They're like, we can't be mean to them. We have to be civilized and we have to fight them with logic. This is why that will never work. Their income, not even just their income, not even just that, their identity, everything they believe in the world depends on them willfully misunderstanding any logical argument that you try to put towards them. So it's not even just their income. If it was just their income, we might still be able to appeal to like a higher level humanity and you can still get paid. But their very identity, who they perceive themselves to be, depends on them willfully misunderstanding and willfully misinterpreting reality. Really excellent point, Gordy. Thank you for making it.
Unleashing of gangsterization, and they've always been barbaric. But some barbarians still have certain kinds of constraints. Whereas now the gangsterization of the empire, with a ruling class so decayed that it's very difficult for social movements to have impact on elites who are gangsters. I mean, the hypocrisy is the tribute that vice pays the virtue. So you're a hypocrite. Yes. At least you still.
This is another great point. The point of logic is only useful to those not fully indoctrinated or dependent on it. What does that mean? If someone is fully bought into the far left ideology, they see their identity as part of that. They see their income as depending on that. There is no amount of logic that you can use to try to convince them otherwise. It's not going to work. The only people who can be convinced are people who do not depend on being right.
Have standards.
Oh, actually, one more. They don't just believe in this, they are this. Never underestimate how much their perceived identity will hang on to this ideology because their entire world falls apart if the ideology falls apart. Deborah says the emotional system takes precedence over the higher cognitive functions, and I can present research studies to support this. Yeah, it absolutely does. Deborah is 100% correct. They are selling they're not even just selling a feeling, Josh. Although emotions are more powerful than logic in our decision-making process, they're not just selling a feeling. They are selling acceptance in a group. They're selling community. They are selling an identity. Why do you think all these people basically dress the same? They all wear the same types of drab clothes. Why do you think people depend, like with the trans ideology stuff, right? Gender expression, presenting a certain way. They're all about the presentation, the identity. That's why they rely so heavily on identity politics.
Where we've got ruling class now, it has no standards at all whatsoever. So you can't even call them hypocrites, because the gap between virtue and vice is no longer important. They don't care. That's what greed run amok is. And so dealing with that, there's a sense in which we're glad that we have as many voices, organizations, journals on the left in some ways. And when you think back of where we were, let's say when I was you all's age, let's say.
Right, Josh. I mean, feelings don't care about details. Exactly. Well done.
The neoliberalism was already taking off. The imperial militarism was running amok. Martin was dead. Malcolm was dead. SDS was pushed to the side. The students were more and more filtering to a mainstream rather than listening to what C. Wright Mills had talked about, what Tom Hayden had talked about, what Barbara Ehrenreich was talking about. In that mainstreaming and streamlining of the young students in the knowledge factories, which became so tied to big donors, big beneficiaries, big money, and then investing in South Africa. We can go on and on. So there's a sense in which we can acknowledge just how dim things are, but also acknowledge that in the dimness, you've got some folks still fighting with tremendous energy and quality.
I know that's incredibly inspiring. And that's honestly where I try to draw strength from, because you're right about those moments of despair. It's part of being human. It's part of, actually caring about this struggle and being involved in it. But, one of the other things that comes to mind is you mentioned the Reagan era. When I think of the Reagan era, I really think about, the neoliberal era of America like taking off. And now there's a lot more critique and criticism of neoliberalism, which is a good sign. But I think back at the Reagan era, and when you look at the debate that he had with George H.W. Bush on immigration, it sounded like two liberals debating each other on immigration. And you see how our discourse on certain issues has actually been regressing over the last few decades. You look at the open and overt hatred that's spewed on literally like news outlets today, and the lack of any type of shame in that kind of discourse or rhetoric. And so, you mentioned how we have made some progress, but there's also this underlying system that we're all trying to fight under. And that system has the incentives in the wrong place, right? It incentivizes people, in many cases, to kind of abandon the fight for equality, whether it be on social issues or economic issues, for personal gain, personal interest. And honestly, when you think about the need for survival, you almost can't even blame people for doing that. But how do we mitigate that? How do we prevent it from happening?
Yeah, but all we have is our traditions and each other, which is to say our movements. So we have to be able to generate sources of insight and sources of inspiration. You need both simultaneously. The insight has to flow from the quality of our social and historical analysis. So that
I want everyone to really pay attention to what he's saying, because we can take the things that he's saying and apply them on our side. So that some of the ideas he has, they're not just specific to leftists or socialists, whatever. We can take the same ideas and use them against them. So make sure you're listening carefully and thinking about how you can apply these ideas. Jenny's getting inky with it said, this is why you have to plant seeds of doubt and let them figure it out for themselves. It's very hands-off process to change a closed mind. Jenny, that is absolutely correct. 100%. You cannot wake people up by hitting them over the head with a sledgehammer. You have to plant seeds, let them percolate, let them marinate, and then several months or even years after you plant the seeds, that's when people can start to wake up. But it cannot happen as an overnight process. It just doesn't. It doesn't work that way.
For example, I mean, to go back to Reaganism versus Trumpism, how do you account for the neo-fascist turn? How do you account for the rawness of the atavism, the rawness of the hatred, the rawness of the contempt? It was already there in Reagan's movement, but it was not as raw. Well, there you have a collapse of a Republican Party. You have a collapse of a certain kind of conservatism that was tied to traditional values, fiscal tightness, suspicion of federal government, and so forth and so on. The underlying common denominator was allegiance to big capital and money, allegiance to militarism abroad, and deeply white supremacists and male supremacists, and also anti-Jewish and anti-homophobic. But the neo-fascist version is different. There's no doubt about it, and that's the rawness of it, you see. And, in different places, I mean, in Portugal and Spain and Argentina and Chile and so forth, they've had neo-fascists who have been part of their public life for a long time. Whereas in the United States now, other than Black folk dealing with white supremacy, which has its own neo-fascist effects, that most Americans are not used to having neo-fascists in public life. So explicit, so raw in their hatred and contempt for those cast as other. So we have to provide insight, historical analysis, and social analysis so people can actually see more clearly what's going on. But they also have to be fired up. That's where the inspiration comes in. And that's where the sense, you can't be Pollyannish, you can't be Disneylandish. We're just going to turn the corner and we have a revolution. No. These are some thugs running things. They will kill your mama. They will lie on you. They will send you to jail. They will crush you. They will undercut your career. They'll do anything. And that's what neo-fascists historically have done across national boundaries. Though each neo-fascism has its historical, specifically different qualities relative to context and relative to the nation state and the economy at a particular moment in any history. See? So, but it's that seeing and that being in movement, that insight and the inspiration that we need. And that's another reason why Jacobin Magazine is so very important. Because people are hungry and thirsty, looking for the real thing. This is what Brother Glenn Ford and I spent so much time. And that's why I love that brother so and miss him so. The Black Agenda Report, he's out there all by himself with Margaret and Ajamu and a few others. And what is he doing? Let's keep track on the decadence of the Black bourgeoisie. Let's keep track of the decadence of Black neoliberal leadership that's leading Black folks suffering so incessantly on every level, psychic, political, economic, leading folk into a dead end. That's the Obama mania and all that other mess, you see. Well, Glenn was carrying the Black Agenda Report, just like Jacobin, carrying the truth-telling and the justice-seeking against that kind of mainstream hegemonic way of looking at America and Black America. And in the end, more and more people recognize it. Brother Glenn was right. Sister Margaret's right. Brother John tends to be more right than we thought. Jacobin's right about these things. I'll be dang, they seem so far out. They seem so outside of the mainstream. You don't say, because that mainstream is so truncated. You remember this wonderful line from Henry James and Robert Louis Stevens on January 12th, I think it was 1901. He says, No theory is kind to us that cheats us of seeing. No theory is kind to us that cheats us of seeing. So neo-fascist vision, neoliberal vision, they cheat us of seeing. You can't see the suffering. You can't see the structures. You can't see the institutions.
Some might argue the
same
as socialism,
the forms of
Cornel.
solidarity that are fighting it. So that if people are locked into neoliberal corporate media, they're not going to see too much.
Yeah.
They're locked into the Fox News, they're not going to see too much.
They think Fox News is
where do you get
neoliberal?
the broader, comprehensive analysis that allows people to see and then be inspired? That's the real challenge right now, and that's why we've got to become even more fortified in sustaining institutions like DACA.
Yeah. You mentioned the black bourgeoisie, and there was an article in Jacobin that looked at the victory of India Walton in Buffalo for mayor, and she actually did better in neighborhoods that were white and Latino than in her own neighborhood, which was heavily black.
They're going to consider her white, by the way.
You know, this a black nurse, radical socialist who wins. On primarily a white and Latino voting base, while her neighborhood, which is heavily black, voted against her. And similar thing happened with Bernie. What is the what's the dynamic there? The sort of credibility of the black bourgeoisie with a lot of black voters to deliver, frankly, conservative political outcomes, even though when you poll black Americans, they're the.
Did he just say that the black bourgeoisie voters are delivering conservative outcomes? He's basically one step away from calling them white.
Most left people on every issue in the country. How does that dynamic work?
Yeah. Both of y'all asked such wonderful questions. I'm telling you, but it just reconfirms what I'm saying about.
I'm going to clip that. Yeah.
But no, I think it's important to keep the context in mind that you see with Bob Moses and Martin King, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, and the Rabbi Heschel and the Tom Haydens, because it was a multiracial movement in the 60s. Breaking the back of American apartheid, breaking the back of the old Jim Crow. And it produced two major results. One was the new Jim Crow, which was the mass incarceration of the black masses, the black poor and working class. And then there was the mass incorporation of the black middle classes. And with so many of the radical leaders assassinated or incarcerated, it meant then that liberal and neoliberal black leadership was viewed as the vanguard of the black freedom movement. Mm. And so with Brother Barack Obama, you get the height of success in the American empire. He's running the whole empire. Well, that's a major shadow cast. Now, what did he do about the new Jim Crow and the mass incarceration? What did he do about the unbelievable class collapse in terms of schools and education and healthcare and housing for the black masses? Now, he made it worse. Mm-hmm. He made it worse because he went with Wall Street. He bailed out Wall Street. But the model of black success became that black presidency. And so the black politicians imitate and emulate his neoliberal politics, thinking that's the way to win elections. That's what we ran up against with Brother Bernie. How can we account for the fact that the most progressive presidential candidate in the 20th century was not supported by the most progressive voting bloc in America, namely the black voting bloc? Why? Because the Obama shadow was cast so deeply that we, myself and Nina Turner and Danny Glover and a host of black folk, we could not push effectively against that Obama shadow, that Obama effect, which goes back to the mass incorporation of especially the Black middle classes into liberal and neoliberal politics and into being well adjusted to an unjust empire.
Did you just hear what he said? I want to hear people's interpretation in the chat of what he said, but that was kind of mind-blowing what he just said there. What I heard was Barack Obama cast such a big shadow when he was elected president that it was impossible for the leaders in the Black community to effectively advocate for Bernie Sanders because the expectation was set by them that a white man that Bernie could not make up for the fact that he was an old white man, essentially. What he's saying is that the Black community voted against its own self-interest when they did not vote for Bernie Sanders. And the reason they didn't vote for Bernie Sanders was because Barack Obama created a high expectation that Black men were like the only people who could effectively push their movement. That to me seems like a problem of their own making, doesn't it? Here, let me just rewind a little bit. People are asking. So I'll just rewind a little bit. But this is like pretty astonishing, to be honest.
Hayden's, because it was a multiracial movement in the 60s, breaking the back of American apartheid.
He's literally saying that identity politics fucked them over.
And it produced two major results. One was the new Jim Crow, which was the mass incarceration
of the
Black masses, the Black poor and working class. And then there was the mass incorporation of the Black middle classes. And with so many of the radical leaders assassinated or incarcerated, it meant then that liberal and neoliberal Black leadership was viewed as the vanguard of the Black freedom movement. Mm. And so with Brother Barack Obama, you get the height of success in the American empire. He's running the whole empire. Well, that's a major shadow cast. Now, what did he do about the new Jim Crow and the mass incarceration? What did he do about the unbelievable class collapse in terms of schools and education and healthcare and housing for the Black masses? Now, he made it worse. Mm-hmm. He made it worse because he went with Wall.
I want to point something out because I hear this from the right all the time. Obama probably red-pilled way more Black people away from the Democrats than anyone else. No. That is not correct. The only people who believe this are conservatives. Obama didn't red-pill anyone. This is why people need to start watching media that's not in their echo chamber. And I'm not trying to pick on you and Palomama. I'm really not. But like you guys got to understand, like, no matter what Obama did in the media that most people watch, Obama could do nothing wrong. It did not matter what the end result was. Like, I was thrilled about Obamacare. And to be honest, Obamacare did actually save my ass for about a year. So I was still like, I'm not actually displeased about that. Like, it was there when I needed it. And it sucks. It's really expensive, but it was better than any other option I had at the time. But what I really want people to hear is, like, there was Obama didn't red pill anyone. It didn't matter how much the right hated him. It didn't matter how much he made Republicans cry. He was presented as a literal god in the media every single night. What year, Joshua? I don't believe you. See, the only people who say this, and maybe he did, I don't know. The only people who say this are people who were never really sucked into the Democratic talking points in the first place. And conservatives love to pretend that they were once Democrats when in fact they were never Democrats.
Wall Street. He bailed out Wall Street. But the model of Black success became that Black presidency.
Model Black
and
success
so the
became
Black politicians imitate and emulate his neoliberal politics, thinking that's the way to win elections. That's what we ran up against with Brother Bernie. How can we account for the fact that the most progressive...
Do you guys understand that when Obama was campaigning, and again, I live in New Hampshire, so I see a lot more of this than like the average person, and I remember this. When Obama was campaigning, you would have to get to an Obama event. It was like a Trump rally. That was what it was like. To get into an Obama event, you had to get there hours early, wait in line. Most of the time, you didn't even get in because at some point they didn't figure out that the places weren't big enough to hold the people who wanted to be there. It was like seeing a fucking rock star. That was what it was like. Yeah, but they didn't know this. What I am suggesting is that there is still to this day not a realization of what Obama's policies were. No matter how much Republicans hated him, Obama red-pilled exactly 0 people. He just pissed conservatives off. He might have pissed independents off too, but he did not red pill Democrats. He did not wake Democrats up at all.
Progressive presidential candidate in the 20th century was not supported by the most progressive voting bloc in America, namely the Black voting bloc. Why? Because the Obama shadow was cast so deeply that we, myself, and Nina Turner, and Danny Glover, and a host of Black folk, we could not push
and then he was reelected
against that Obama shadow, that Obama effect, which goes back to...
So Josh in the chat is saying that Obama red-pilled him. Again, I question that, and I question that, Josh, no offense, but like, because I don't know who you are, and I've seen way, way, way too many people that are conservative pretend that this happened, and then you later find out that they never voted Democrat in their lives. But the problem is that he still got elected in 2012, which is when Josh was saying he red-pilled. So maybe he got one Democrat, I don't know, but like, he still got reelected. Resoundingly. Sin says, a lot of conservatives were saying that it was a landmark vote. First Black man, by the way. It was unreal. Yeah.
The mass incorporation of especially the Black middle classes into liberal and neoliberal politics. And
here's the thing. You didn't hear it from people who were Democrats. You heard it from people who were independent. He got reelected in 2012. Don't tell me he red-pilled Democrats. That's who we're talking about right now, is Democrats. If he had red-pilled Democrats, he wouldn't have gotten re-elected. What you're hearing from are either conservatives that rarely or maybe once in their life voted Democrat, or you're hearing it from independents. You are not hearing that from people who are Democrats their entire lives. I promise you. And I know that because I have direct experience with exactly how much the political right loves it when they think they've won one. I'm wrong that he got reelected in 2012. Who won the election in 2012? Everyone in the chat who's saying I'm wrong, remind me. Who won the election in 2012? Who won the election, conservatives, in 2012? Let's hear it. Who won the election in 2012 if I'm wrong? Prove to me that I'm wrong by telling me who won the election in 2012. Oh, was it Obama? Was it Obama? It was Obama? Obama won in 2012? It was Obama? It was Barack Obama? It was Obama? Exactly. Don't tell me he red-pilled people when he still won the presidential election. And it's not as though conservatives were running like a far left or far right conservative during that. They were running Mitt fucking Romney. Mitt Romney is basically a Democrat. Mitt Romney, governor of Massachusetts. Don't tell me that Barack Obama red-pilled Democrats. He did not red-pill Democrats. This is a lie. Who won? Yeah, I don't think Carlin is saying not a single Democrat was red-pilled. By and large, that was not the case. Yes, exactly. Who won the election? Again, Josh, let me hear it from you. Let me hear it. Who won? Who won? Who won in 2012? This is why the right loses. This attitude right here is why you guys just continue to fucking lose over and over and over, and you will be perpetual losers for the rest of your lives because you don't listen. This is exactly why we do Socialism Saturday. To force you to fucking listen. Obama was pretty corporatist, if I remember correctly. Obama was whatever he needed to be to whoever he needed to be it.
Into being well adjusted to an unjust empire and well adapted to an indifferent set of elites, no matter what color they are.
Mm-hmm.
So to make the elites more colorful, more black, more brown, keep the empire in place, keep the predatory capitalist system in place, and things will be better. I mean, that's part of the neoliberal message. So that what is happening now, I'm on my way for Sister Nina Turner.
Mitt Romney,
running
Democrat.
in Cleveland. We got the election coming up on Tuesday. I'm going to spend 5 days there with her. We're going to do 12 events every day the way we did with Bernie, right? And Bernie's going to be there too.
I'm going to tell you guys this. If the right doesn't start actually getting serious about waking people on the left up, they ain't never winning another presidential election ever in their lifetime. The right has already... I'm sorry, I'm going on a separate rant right now. I know this is not Socialism Saturday specifically, but like, and many of the people in the chat have heard my rant before, but maybe some of you haven't. The number one thing that the political right needs to do is to red pill people on the left. They are utter and complete failures in this regard, primarily because they don't listen. They red-pilled, accidentally, a fuck ton of people in 2020. I was one of them. These were real red pills. These were Democrats who were like, Trump is actually doing a good job. The economy's okay. They had actually woken a lot of people up. Trump got like a record number of votes for an incumbent Republican. Now, we can argue about whether or not the election of 2020 was the most perfect election in the history of elections. We can argue about that. But what we cannot argue with is that the right stumbled into actually red-pilling a whole bunch of people in 2020. And then what happened is the right went back to social conservatism after they didn't get their fucking way. And they pissed every single person who went out on a limb to vote for them for the first time off. To the point that they got their asses collectively handed to them in the midterms, which should have been a cakewalk so far as like Republicans were concerned. And I don't want to hear any, they won the midterms, Republicans won the midterms. No, they did not. The Republicans eked out the slightest of victories in the House where they should have won the House by 20 to 30 fucking seats. That's reality. The right lost in the Senate and could actually lose an additional Senate seat. I don't think Herschel Walker is going to win in Georgia. I don't think he's going to win at all. Because the libertarian who forced the runoff in Georgia was not a right-leaning libertarian. He was a left-leaning libertarian. He didn't take votes from the Republicans. He took votes from the Democrats, which means the Democrats are going to get more votes in Georgia in this runoff election than the Republicans, just as a base default. Also, Democrats have better voter turnout operations than Republicans because Republicans sat around for 4 years and said, Scott Presler will save us. Scott Presler will do everything. We don't need to do anything because we have Scott Presler. Well, guess what happened? Scott Presler got sick. The one and only activist that the right actually has got sick the month before leading up to the election. And he was even telling people, he's like, you ain't going to see a red wave. He was very honest. If the right doesn't figure out that they need to wake more people in the left, on the left up, they are going to lose every major election for the rest of their lives because they've already pissed away all of the goodwill that they had in 2020 and in 2021 in the gubernatorial election in Virginia. They won that election in Virginia and they were like, okay, we won based on the schools. So you know what we're going to do now? We're going to stop talking about the schools and talk about social conservatism instead. And then abortion fucked them epically like they have never been fucked before. And what did the right say when the Roe draft decision was leaked? Oh, this won't matter at all. People don't really care about abortion. They whined and complained about this for months. Even when people said, no, women on the left really do care about this. They really do. They really do. Where I was like, no one cares about abortion. It's like, man, Joshua, I wasn't the one that timed you out, but now that you're whining in my chat, I am going to ban your ass if it continues. Don't be a dick. No whining. If you whine one more time, you're going to be permanently banned and I'm not fucking around. Stein says the right is sniffing its own farts too much. I said, Stein. I got you. I got you. Yeah, they are. They really are. Because they don't listen. They do not listen. I don't know, like conservatives in the chat, I'm honestly asking, because it's on some level you're listening to me now. What is going to be required to get your tribe to listen? Because I know a lot of people, and I'm in this group as well, that voted Republican in 2020 and will never vote Republican again because of the just asinine strategy and constant whining and constant complaining and constant nonsense that has gone on the conservative right since then. Nick, some Karam coins for your rant, Miss K. Cheers. Thank you, Karma. Thank you for that, Nick. I appreciate it. Philosophical Trucker says the Republican Party isn't the answer. It's not the answer for populists, conservatives, or libertarians. Until people get it out of their head, it ain't going to change. Yeah. I really have no idea what is going to force the right to come to this conclusion that they cannot win if they keep on this track that they're on. Because they don't listen. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. Really is.
Listen, Bernie will be there too on Saturday at the rally, trying to deal with a moribund, milquetoast, neoliberal, corporate-dominated Democratic Party that has progressives on its edges. But most of the energy of the party is found among the progressives. It's found in the Quad and so forth. And Nina Turner is a major voice figure, brilliant visionary politician wrestling with that dilemma, as it were.
Bob says, hang on, that wasn't what I meant to display on the screen. Sorry, hang on. Bob says it's almost as if it's intentional. Well, yeah, of course it's intentional, but the problem is that it's caused by the base. It's caused by normal people. It's caused by the average conservative voter. If the average conservative voter demanded that things were different, they'd be different. But they don't. And I know this from direct experience. I wrote conservatives a fucking novel on Twitter. Here is what you need to know in order to win. Here's what you need to do in order to win. Stop doing this right now or you're never going to win again. Here is how Democrats think. Here is how you're losing votes. I did this every fucking day on Twitter for a year and a half. And for my troubles, I was canceled. I was smeared. I was called mentally ill. That wasn't the influencers, although they certainly bought into it and they let it. That was the base. I have hit piece videos about me all over the internet. They place smear pieces in the media about me. I gave them an exact strategy that literally all they had to do was listen. And they wouldn't do it, and I was vilified, and I was called an anti-Semite and all manner of fucking things, called a narcissist, called mentally ill all over the fucking place. And what do I spend my time doing now? Convincing people how much the right sucks, how much they will never win, and I create new libertarians every day. Because I see them as a lost cause. And it's so frustrating because they could win if they wanted to. They really could win if they wanted to. But they don't. And it's coming from the base. It is not coming from the influencers. It's coming from the base.
It's a very, very tough race.
Anyway,
so that,
back to socialism. Thank you for allowing me my point of personal privilege.
Is that there's a sleepwalking. There's a neoliberal sleepwalking among Black leadership that has tremendous impact on Black voters. And keep in mind that probably majority of Black people don't vote at all, because that's another kind of statement, right? Another kind of expression in and of itself. But things are shifting now. Things are shifting. I know in my own work, 10 years ago, I used to have Black folks say, you have lost your mind, critical of the Black president. You ought to be shaming yourself. I'll go back to these same contexts, these same sites, and they'll say, I called you every day.
And let me give you an example of what conservatives do. And Joshua, I no longer believe you were ever a Democrat. You're not speaking like a Democrat. You're not acting like a Democrat. I've been a subscriber for a while now. I don't know who you are. I've never seen you in my chat before. And you're not allowed to say the truth. You can't handle the truth. This is why you idiots lose. I told you this guy was lying. Because I can sniff this shit out. It's not even hard to tell when you guys are lying, by the way. Not even hard to tell. Because you do it all the fucking time. Has anyone ever seen Joshua in my chat before or comment on my channel before? All my regulars? I fucking knew it. This is a good example of what conservatives do. They come in, they fucking lie. Nuclear, you're not new. And then they say, you can't handle the truth. This is all your fault. Me. He's never been here. Reagan's been here consistently for 3 years, bro. Sin doesn't know who you are. Bot's never seen you. Dragon Water hasn't seen you. Jan has never seen you. Emily's never seen you. Don't fucking bullshit a bullshitter. I can sniff you assholes out. Yeah, well, Gloria, he might be new, but look at what he said. Look at what he said. Hang on. Where'd it go? I've been a subscriber for a while. No, you haven't, dude. And maybe if you have, you haven't been participating. You haven't been to the live chats. You haven't been to the live streams. You haven't been in the comments. Exactly. I remember my regulars. I know who's been subscribed and who participates in my channel. Don't fucking come in here and lie to try to make a point for your team. Because I'll be able to find that out so easily.
Thing but a child of God, but I see you were telling the truth. I said, well, I've been saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep. We're about to get an epic grant.
Very well. Yeah.
It's coming. It's coming. I think you're right about that. And the reason I point this out, guys, is because this is why we have to listen to content from a variety of different people, because you have to understand how the right talks. You have to understand how the left talks. You have to understand how libertarians talk. These are three completely different communities. They use different language. They have different norms. They have different perspectives. You've got to listen to people outside of your echo chamber and really understand it. Because once you understand it, it's so easy to identify who's lying. People lie on the internet all the time. All the time. Emphasize says Indiana Jones and the Art of the Dial Destiny, or excuse me, that I totally butchered that. Emphasize Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny screams at the continuing ethnic cleansing of. I don't agree with you, Emphasize. You know that, and I'm not reading the rest of that. Jenny's getting inky with it. The fact that he's complaining about your take says he doesn't watch you that often, or else he wouldn't be complaining. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Gotta up your BS meters, guys.
Turner and the congressional race for Ohio's 11th district. And I do want to talk about that a little bit because, you know, there wasn't really much attention paid to that race until it was very clear that Nina Turner was in fact going to win the Democratic primary there. That was when Hillary Clinton got involved and gave the endorsement. And I mean, I don't think anybody's really excited about a Hillary Clinton endorsement, but what that came along with was a lot of corporate cash. And you mentioned Senator Bernie Sanders and how he's planning on rallying for Nina, which is wonderful. But on the other side with Chantel Brown, who's the neoliberal candidate who's up against Nina Turner,
and you have okay. This is the last thing I'm going to say about this, I promise, and then we're really going to listen. But like the reason that I think it's important to sniff out when people are lying, and this is my personal, like when I red pilled and I got thrown into the conservative fucking machine, I hadn't developed this ability yet. And it totally fucked me. The fact that I had not developed the ability to know when people were lying and trying to snow me, I made so many mistakes in 2020 as a direct result of not understanding who to trust and who not to trust, who to listen to, who not to listen to, who is authentic and who's a bullshitter, who actually cares about changing things and who's just grifting on the fucking internet. I made so many mistakes because I hadn't yet developed this ability. And I took a lot of things that people said at face value when I really shouldn't have. And had I developed these abilities, I wouldn't have done that. Gordy, you're about to cross the whining line really, really soon. There is no whining in my chat. Stop whining. If you respond to this and say, I'm not whining, you're going to get banned. So if you want to stick around, I suggest we take the whining down several notches. I see a super chat coming in from Emphasize. Disney currently under attack, corporate espionage. Is there something is there like breaking Disney news? I guess I should look. So I guess like when I talk about this stuff and knowing the different language that people use and knowing how to identify when someone's trying to snow you and when they're not, it's because I needed to learn this and now I'm trying to pass that knowledge on to you. Dragon Water, I've thought about it. I really have. But I don't know how to build a YouTube channel. Like I looked into this stuff. Like I don't know how to build it, but I know how to identify when people are being shady on the internet. I'll tell you that. Yeah, exactly, Maximus. Once I stepped back and started listening to the different ideologies, the tribalism really became clear to me. Exactly. I listened to the three ideologies, again, Republican, Libertarian, Democrat. I have them set up as actual echo chambers on my desktop. So I looked at all Republicans in the same column. I look at all Democrats in the same column. I look at all Libertarians in the same column. These are different universes, different language, different cultural norms, different priorities, different things they care about. They're 3 different universes.
Representative Jim Clyburn, who's going to be doing some campaigning for her. I bring him up because he has certainly gone out of his way to carry out the best interests of Joe Biden. And Joe Biden has turned around and, failed to deliver anything that Clyburn had wanted, really. They're not going to do away with the filibuster. Biden isn't calling for the Senate to do away with the filibuster, which essentially stalls any important legislation that Clyburn or any other Democrat might want. So what's your response to that? And what do you think the influence of corporate money in that election is likely to do?
Well, indeed. One, that
I'm absolutely biased. I think everyone is stupid.
And cleavage.
That's my bias.
Between black neoliberals and white neoliberals like Biden or Kamala Harris, who's on Biden's side. Because by Biden's refusal,
did he just call Kamala Harris a white neoliberal? He kind of did. That's hilarious. Let me just rewind this little part here. I know I've been ranting for a minute, but that was fucking hilarious.
An increasing conflict and cleavage between black neoliberals and white neoliberals like Biden or Kamala Harris, who's on Biden's side. Because by Biden's refusal to hit the filibuster head on so that voting rights suppression is somehow secondary and tertiary.
Hang on. Moxie has a question I can answer really quickly. Can you explain briefly the major difference between conservative and libertarian? Sure. Conservatives are authoritarian. Libertarians are not authoritarian. They actually believe in individual liberty. Conservatives do not believe in individual liberty. They just claim to believe in individual liberty as a way to try to force their conservative ideology onto you and to make you live by their rules, but they don't actually believe in free speech. They're not opposed to cancel culture. They engage in every single tactic the left uses while claiming they believe in individual liberty, but they do not. Libertarians actually believe in individual liberty. That's the difference. Hang on. Oh, emphasize with some breaking news. A Disney employee, intentionally paying for Rotten Tomatoes from their friends that they know won't sell to make the company go broke is corporate espionage. Well, we'll have to look into that, emphasize. Thank you. I appreciate the update.
Neoliberal black politicians, voting rights is number one. Now, it's still too narrow, it's still too truncated, but voting rights still are very important. And so you're getting more and more tension between Biden and his black neoliberal supporters. You can see it even on in the media and so forth. The critique of Biden. Now, it's not a structural critique.
Are you calling me a narcissist?
Critique.
I hope this is a good thing.
Biden's making it very clear that he's not going to touch the filibuster. And if you don't touch the filibuster, you are allowing the shadow of Jim Crow within the political sphere to expand. And neoliberal black politicians can't put up with that. Not at all. Now, exactly where that will go is an open question, because in the situation of Cleveland, Ohio 11, where you have Nina Turner, who is a bona fide progressive, who is very critical of Biden, not just when it comes to his refusal to hit the filibuster head on, but also his allegiance to Wall Street, his allegiance to the Pentagon, his promoting of predatory capitalism and the militarism abroad, a broader critique within the electoral political system. She then gets targeted by corporate money, as you rightly say, tied to the Hillary endorsement, you see. She gets targeted by those concerned about her being critical of American military.
Don't put that picture in my head, Nuclear. I'll take your wrench away.
In Africa and Latin America, but in the Middle East.
I don't know about that,
but get a lot of our deeply neoliberal and right-wing Jewish brothers and sisters in their uncritical defense of Israel, pouring big money in. And once you get that kind of coming together of neoliberals against a genuine progressive like Nina Turner, then it becomes very clear who's on which side.
Rand Paul is a libertarian that's registered as a Republican, but he's a libertarian. Marjorie Taylor Greene is not a libertarian in any way. Marjorie Taylor Greene is an authoritarian conservative. She is not a libertarian by any stretch of the imagination. Rand Paul, cool. Thomas Massey, cool. We like them. Marjorie is funny. She's interesting to watch. It's something different. Marjorie is not a libertarian. Yes, Pink Flame of Liberty has an awesome YouTube channel. She does. It's true.
It's not just Clyburn. It's the
We've
whole
completely
Black
departed
Congressional
from
Caucus.
Socialism
I mean,
Saturday
most of the Black Congressional Caucus have come out for the neoliberal candidates. And I was glad to see AOC and a few others come out.
Thank you, Ken.
For
Welcome.
Nina, and we want to see even more, we hope.
Appreciate you being here.
But it just, again, allows us to see more clearly, who is allied with whom when it comes to the three fundamental sources we must always highlight: Wall Street, Pentagon, and xenophobic ideologies and sensibilities. White supremacists, male supremacists, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, homophobic, and patriarchal.
You mentioned the uprisings that were just 12 months ago, and they seem like forever ago at this point. But the two largest sort of street demonstrations of my lifetime were the anti-Iraq war protests and the protests that emerged after the murder of George Floyd.
These people aren't anti-war
And
at all
it strikes me
anymore.
that, in both cases, they were huge and all over the streets, but and in both cases, like, the Iraq war raged on, and the racism of the criminal justice system rages on as well. But the difference in the reaction from the power structures to them, to me, are quite striking, in that the Iraq war protests were successfully marginalized by corporate and government power structures to make them look like ridiculous fringe.
Okay, I'll rewind because a few people have said now he blamed the Jews, and I maybe just missed it, but let's go back and listen to him blame the Jews. Because that's highly relevant to our time right now. Yeah, no one's anti-war anymore except the libertarians. That includes the Republicans. Republicans are not anti-war either. Conservatives are not anti-war either. Conservatives have been sending billions and billions and billions of dollars to Ukraine. All right, let's see if we can hear him blame the Jews.
Side, because it's not just Clyburn, it's the whole Black Congressional Caucus. I mean, most of the Black Congressional Caucus have come out for the neoliberal candidates. And I was glad to see AOC and a few others come out for Nina, and we want to see even more, we hope, this weekend. But it just, again, allows us to see more clearly, who is allied with whom when it comes to the three fundamental sources we must always highlight: Wall Street, Pentagon, and xenophobic ideologies and sensibilities. White supremacists, male supremacists, anti-Jewish, anti-Muslim, anti-Arab, homophobic.
Said anti-Jewish.
And patriarchal.
He's not blaming the Jews. He doesn't mean Jews when he says neoliberal.
The uprisings that were just 12 months ago, and they seem like forever ago at this point.
He doesn't mean Jews when he says neoliberal. He means moderates. He means, well, not even moderates. He means people who are not far left socialist.
But the two largest sort of street demonstrations of my lifetime were the anti-Iraq war protests and the protests that emerged after the murder of George Floyd. And it strikes me that, in both cases, they were huge and all over the streets, but and in both cases, like, the Iraq war raged on, and the racism of the criminal justice system rages on as well. But the difference in the reaction from the power structures to them, to me, are quite striking, in that the Iraq war protests were successfully marginalized by corporate and government power structures to make them look like ridiculous fringe people, even though there was millions of people on the street. with George Floyd protests, we've seen a sort of absorption of the energy by corporate America. And it's almost commoditized a certain language about race, that a certain radical language around race that has become okay to be used within the context of, say, like a JP Morgan ad, or, Raytheon doing, race trainings in their corporate retreats. I was just curious what your reaction to that phenomenon has been.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to get a very different reaction to imperial militarism than you are domestic racism. Because in the latter, you can't talk about American culture without talking about Black culture.
What are you talking about?
You see, the whole nation has been Afro-Americanized when it comes to culture, when it comes to music. Music's a dominant form of transcendence in late capitalist civilization, especially for young people, you see.
They think we're in a late
so
capitalist
you
civilization?
have to hit that in some way head on. And that's part of the mass incorporation I was talking about. You got to absorb it. You got to dilute the radical demands in order to get people to adapt and adjust to a status quo. So it becomes what I call, I talk about this in terms of my own Harvard situation, where you bring in the Black professors, you make them the public face of your institution, but it looks like you're so multicultural, looks like you're so concerned about racism, diversity, equity, inclusion is the words you use over and over and over again. And it ends up just Jim Crow new style under market conditions.
He's calling them out for virtue signaling. Holy
professional
shit.
managerial context. Because in terms of who actually makes the most fundamental decisions, in terms of who is accountable to whom, it's still very much a white supremacist affair. It's still very much a white supremacist male affair in some ways.
He called them out for virtue signaling. They're not doing enough.
Inclusive too, and keep the hierarchy in place, keep the oppressive structure still in place. And corporations have to do the same thing. So the first thing you begin with symbolic gestures. Oh my God, we've hired 3 Black folk in the last week. Oh my God, we've changed the name of monuments. Oh my God, we've got our commercials now with Black faces. Don't you see us responding? Oh my, we're undergoing a revolution here. Let's have a party. Let's celebrate diversity. Please get off the crack pipe. Spare me.
No, he's not calling the far left racist. He's calling the neoliberals racist.
That's democratizing. They're talking about racially, multiracially commodified is not the same
He's
as
saying they're virtue
power
signaling.
sharing in forms of democratized.
They're not communist enough. They're not socialist enough.
Things. And so I think you're right that the protests have opened up new opportunities for Black middle class jobs, just like they opened up new opportunities for certain Black professors. But then the question becomes, if it's Jim Crow new style, what does that mean? Are you going to respect the professors who are there? How long are the new folk in corporate America really going to last? How high will they go? If they go to the top, will they have already so thoroughly reshaped and refashioned themselves in the corporate elites that they might as well be white anyway? In terms of their actions and behaviors, in terms of how they spend their money and deploy their power and so forth. See, those are the kind of questions that are very important, not just for leftists, because I think we have to be very, very honest and bold about our leftist vision analysis. It's not just a leftist analysis, it's a quest for the truth. And the condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. The Negro National Anthem is lift every voice. That's a democratic spirit. Every voice must be lifted. You got all these masses of voices out here that are not heard. Poor and working class. You're not lifting. You're not listening to those voices. They're not choosing poverty. They're not choosing jobs that don't have a living wage. They're not choosing indecent housing. They're not choosing unavailable health care. They're not choosing what these schools look like, so decrepit and so forth. So there's voice.
Do you know what he's saying, really? You ain't Black if you aren't a socialist. That's kind of what he's saying. He's basically saying that we can't even trust the Black Democratic voters because they don't use their power wisely. Or even just like the white Democratic politicians who pretend to be on the left. He's saying they don't use their power wisely. They don't use their power in the way that we want them to, because the 4 goals of the woke left are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in a Marxist utopia. He's not even race baiting, though. He's not race baiting. He is saying that if you are not a socialist, then you aren't going far enough. This is a call against capitalism, guys. It's not about race at all. It is only and exclusively about capitalism.
Voices are not being heard. And so in that sense, that's for me, and you all know, my own revolutionary Christian view about this thing is that, it's leftist in terms of being on an ideological spectrum, but I'm concerned about the truth. I'm concerned about justice. I'm concerned about goodness. I'm concerned about beauty. Prince produced some beautiful music. He got his new album dropping today, right? Welcome to America. You all know the story about how he and I had this debate about, I said, Prince, you my dear brother, you a genius, but you ain't no Curtis Mayfield. So he went in the studio and made some Curtis Mayfield music, Born to Die. Sound just like Moments in Superfly, part of his genius. But he's concerned about truth and beauty and goodness. He just happens to land with a leftist critique of a decaying American empire shot through with greed and hatred and the vicious form of the white supremacy that so often are isolated from predatory capitalism and imperial militarism. See, that's the critiques of Coates and company, because they want to fetishize and reify race and white supremacy so that that's the fundamental issue. And it is a crucial issue. But if it's not tied to a critique of the hierarchies of empire and capitalism, it's just a neoliberal face posing as so progressive, posing as so
Who can explain this? Who can answer Lizard's question? If you come to happy hour regularly, which is Fridays at 5 p.m. on my second channel, youtube.com/activelyunwoke. I did a special happy hour screening yesterday on my main channel, but it's usually on my second one. But people who attend happy hour regularly should be able to answer Lizard's question. Who knows why? Who can explain why capitalism is white supremacy? Well, Lizard, they're on demand. You don't have to be there live to see them. Whiteness is capitalism. Who can explain why capitalism is white supremacy? He just said it. Why would capitalism be considered white supremacy? The real reason. I don't give a fuck about the reason they give. Because white people built the system. Okay, keep going. Because whiteness equals power and power equals capitalism. Yes. When they use the term whiteness, they're not talking about skin color. This is something critical that people need to understand. They are not talking about skin color. Skin color has nothing to do with it at all. That's why Larry Elder can be a white supremacist, because skin color has nothing to do with it. Yup, Nick, capitalism is the power structure and whiteness is who owns the power structure. Exactly. When they're saying whiteness, white supremacy, they're talking about who is bourgeois. Who is bourgeois? That's what they mean when they say whiteness. It's not about skin color at all. Who is in the bourgeois? If you're in the bourgeois, you're going to be white. If you're in the proletariat, you're going to not be white. The only people who are guilty of whiteness and white supremacy are people who are in the bourgeois. Proletariat or not. That's why they can have capitalism, and it's totally fine, because they're not part of the bourgeois. They're not part of the power structure. They're not part of the ruling class. That's what that means. Everyone needs to divorce the term whiteness from skin color because it does not reference this at all. Jay Hundo, wow, KGB did a good job with 60s and professors. Yes, they did. The greatest enemy of the woke left is not white people. It's capitalism. That's what they're going after. Whiteness, yeah, this is a great way to think of it. Whiteness equals white collar. But not even white collar, because you can be a white collar employee. You can be like a manager or something within like a white collar, like corporate environment and still not be white because you're not a VP or a president or a CEO. You're not an owner. What it really means is about who owns the private property. Remember, these people, we know Anna Kasparian talked about this earlier. These people want to abolish private property. Where does that come from? Bing! Whiteness is who owns private property. Who is a landlord? Who is a boss?
It ain't in the end that courageous just to talk about how racist America is. Now, I know that Kamala Harris has trouble with it. She say we're not even a racist country. Biden said we're not a racist country. Clyburn said we're not a racist country, just racist pockets. And it all started with Tim Scott. We're not a racist country. You say, oh my God. If we're in that kind of denial, then we're really in deep trouble. Mm-hmm. So to come along and say America's racist, which I agree with Coates and the others, yes, that's true. But that's just a starting point. And if you don't go further with your critiques of empire and predatory capitalism, you're going to end up reproducing structures of domination that are going to continually weigh heavily on the Black masses as you go off and live in your mansion and buy your second house in Martha's Vineyard and get your new jobs in a new university with millions of dollars and think that somehow you're on the cutting edge of being the vanguard of Black liberation.
Nuclear, I can't fix it, okay? You just made it impossible.
Well,
you have like 17 accounts. You're going to be fine. You already have a wrench on this account, bro. I made up for it.
You talk about systems of domination, and it's certainly true within our borders, and it's also very true outside of our borders, where the United States, through our foreign policy, goes against the will of people in various countries. We topple governments, leaders who have been democratically elected. Right now, a big story is the whistleblower Daniel Hale, the one who leaked documents informing the American public about America's disgusting drone war abroad. He just got sentenced to 45 months in prison. We know what happens to whistleblowers these days if they, do anything courageous in informing the public about the wrongdoings of the Pentagon. Then you also see the type of discourse taking place in regard to the protests in Cuba. And what's fascinating to me is, while there is a bit of an awakening in regard to human rights abuses within our borders, there's still a significant portion of the country that thinks that it's totally okay to, not only criticize, perceived human rights abuses or actual human rights abuses abroad, but say that we need to do airstrikes or use military force in response to that. But why is it that there's still kind of this illusion of freedom within our borders? Because I think that that's not really the case. We saw the way some of those protesters were treated last summer, getting snatched up by federal agents and thrown into unmarked vans. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you expect to see in the countries that we bomb, right? What can we do to kind of further the awakening about what's actually happening in our borders and what we need to do to actually address that, rather than talk about toppling governments we don't like?
Right, no, indeed. See, I think that the deeper one finds oneself in genuine struggle for freedom is the more readier one sees just how aggressive the repressive apparatus of the U.S. nation state is.
You can download it. You don't need to buy it.
So, we started with Bob Mosley, get beat by white brother Castro, months in jail, We got H. Rap Brown right now, Tucson, Arizona, 40-something years. Imam Jamil, Mumi Abu Jamal, Sada Shakur. So many who got deeply involved in genuine struggle for freedom and found themselves up against ugly repression.
Yeah, I get it. Me
and
too.
They didn't have to go outside of the borders to find that repression. Same would be true in terms of our precious brothers and sisters coming in from Mexico and the issues of the immigrants, the precious immigrants. You'll see just how repressive things are. Same is true in terms of our radical trade unionists. And even for intellectuals, I mean, good God Almighty, I was just reading about old brother Ray Ginger and his wife Ann Fagan and Carol Weiss King. I mean, these were folk in the 40s who were wiped out by Harvard and other places because of the McCarthyism. And they were fighting for folk who were on their ways to jail. Carol Weiss King needs to be remembered as one of the great lawyers concerned with the vicious, repressive.
So speaking of McCarthy, I have this idea I want to run by people. I kind of want to go back and watch the McCarthy hearings. Has anyone ever done that? I kind of want to do like a special, maybe this can be like a social, I don't know if it'd be socialism, but like, I kind of want to go back and watch the hearings. Well, McCarthy was wrong in his execution. McCarthy wasn't wrong in his premise. He was wrong in his execution. McCarthy did a lot of bad shit, man. He really did. Don't pretend McCarthy was perfect. He was not. He fucked that shit up. But he did have an inkling of being correct. Like, but I think like if people would like that, I mean, maybe that's something we can do. I think it'd be fascinating. I've never watched them.
Apparatus of the nation state. Well, you look at her life and you see what's going on now with immigrants. You say, oh my God, there's continuity in terms of repression. Absolutely. But I do want to say
what actually happened
in terms of what happens outside of our borders, that we have to be morally consistent in our defense of everyday people. When I take the case of Cuba, for example, I was just blessed to sign this statement to let Cuba live on behalf of the calling for the lifting of the sanctions. The sanctions have been immoral, they're barbaric, they're vicious, and so forth and so on. But at the same time, you see, if there were a letter that accented the Cuban government also being accountable to its people. So dissident voices that are being raised, being incarcerated and so forth. But that's authoritarian policies of the Cuban government. I would support that too. And they would say, well, Brother West, how can you sign both of them? Because I'm trying to be consistent. The people themselves are suffering. The fundamental sources of the suffering have to do with imperial sanctions. It has to do with the ways in which the Cuban Revolution had been circumscribed and so forth. But then the Cuban government itself must be made accountable, and therefore the critiques must be made of any authoritarian policies vis-a-vis ordinary people inside of Cuba. I know when I went to Cuba in 1982, I lectured about 25 times. It must have been about the 22nd time. He said, Brother West, you sound like a counter-revolutionary. I said, well, what am I saying? Well, you said that people ought to have the right to raise their voices and be critical of Fidel. I said, yes, I believe elites ought to rotate. And I said that on television. The elites rotate. You calling for Castro to rotate? That's right. They need to rotate. Well, that sounds kind of revolutionary. I don't know what you call it, but all I'm saying is I've come here to defend the Cuban people. And to the degree to which I'm at a critique of U.S. imperialism, which has been vicious, they get patted me on the back.
Wait. So you're telling me, hang on, you're telling me that Cornel West went and lectured in Cuba on 24 occasions. And in one of those occasions, he said on television that Cuba should rotate its leadership. And the people were like, really? And he's like, yes. And I don't know exactly how he was received with that, but like, you would think there might be some sort of, it's kind of like Anna Kasparian and this other guy with the government. It's like they have some inkling that the government is bad. They're like, FBI bad. And then they're like, what's the solution to the FBI being bad? More government. Like, that's going to work. Cornel West is saying, you know what, communist Cuba, maybe you should rotate your leadership. Maybe you should, on occasion, elect another dictator to rule over you that might be to your benefit. And Cuba's like, oh, and it's like, these people have some inkling that the ideology is fucked up. They can identify what's wrong. And then what they don't do is they like follow it to its most logical conclusion. Like, are you saying that a communist dictator is a bad thing? Oh my word.
West, we appreciate that. You tell it. Well, I'm trying to tell the truth. And I had a critique of the Cuban government. Ooh, they came at me tooth and nail. Same was true with the racism in Cuba. We solved the race. We've solved the race problem. Get off the crack pipe. No, you haven't. But you made some major moves, and let's work at it together. But the racism is still operating. So that you had to be honest and candid in such a way that you hope you're not just used by the right wing, because you got folk, in Florida, the right wing, Cubans in Florida. Well, West is on our side, at least on this part, but he's on the other side. Well, it's just a matter of trying to be consistent. I'm not trying to make sides in this regard. We love the Cuban people, period.
We love the Cuban people. We just don't want you to be under a communist dictatorship. But we don't acknowledge the evils of communism.
No, and Dr. West, I think you've been very generous with your time. I think before we let you go, you said you're heading off to go campaign for Nina Turner. If you had a message to deliver to our viewers about who Nina is, what she's like, and why you support her, I think that'd be great.
Oh, yes. Well, first I want to say that we must do all we can to keep alive the higher standards of moral, spiritual, and political excellence represented by Jacobin magazine, has to do with truth telling and justice.
This guy's a grifter. I'm telling you right now. This guy's saying what he needs to say to maintain his status.
It's like trying to keep alive the best of the jazz tradition.
It's like, Jacobin is so great. You're wonderful. You are the revolutionary.
Don't say a word about Sarah Brown. Don't say a word about Louis Armstrong. Don't say a word about Mary Lou Williams. You got to keep the standards up. And that's exactly what you all are able to do in terms of the history. It can't just be contemporary events. Tell the whole genealogy of the ruling class of the American empire now in its decadent moment. This Negro necrotic moment, as he noted in that thing, you see. It's dying from the inside. You got to tell a larger story. So it is with our elected officials that we go to Cleveland. We go to support Nina Turner. Why? Because she is a wave.
I'm a great and wonderful revolutionary
of a Black progressive tradition that goes hand in hand with the U.S. progressive tradition and the international progressive tradition.
I'm a benevolent leader.
And she is this crucial person at this moment is trying to hold up a bloodstained banner of truth-telling and justice-seeking that have to do with moral, spiritual, political standards of excellence. And that excellence is manifest in how deep is your love for everyday people? Do you look at the world through the lens of poor and working people? I don't care what color they are. I was just blessed to write the 60th anniversary for Franz Fanon's Record of the Earth. I got a chance to read it twice. It'll be out in a couple of months.
I can do no wrong.
What is one of the fundamental points he makes there? The massive,
don't think that's not going to get clipped and put on the internet. I'll tell you that right now.
And pervasive neglect of poor and working people, of national bourgeoisies in every corner of the world, including the United States, including Black America. Nina Turner, I was going to say Nina Simone, because they really go hand in hand in terms of their spirit, their vision, their courage, their style, their willingness to tell the truth, right, is concerned about that kind of betrayal and neglect of poor and working people on behalf of politicians, including Black politicians, including Black neoliberal politicians, like the one she's running against. That's why I go down to see Nina Turner in the spirit of Nina Simone.
He just made that up.
Dr. Cornel West, you're an absolute legend. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and we hope you'll do it again soon.
Well, salute both of y'all. Stay strong now.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Well, they're just going to go into super chats now, and I don't really feel like watching them answer super chats, if I'm honest about it. So we're going to cut it right there. We've been going for 3 hours. Man, that was like disappointing, if I'm honest. Socialism Saturday is usually way more extreme than what we watched this week. So if you thought that this was not as crazy as you were hoping, come back next week. I will pick out something next week that is like extra dystopian. We're going for the hardest of the hardcore next week. We might talk about surrogacy again, because the family shit is the most crazy of all socialism. If someone else has something extra dystopian that we should watch, then maybe we can find that. But this was like a light week, to be honest. This was, again, a little bit more mainstream socialist. But I do think it's important that we listen to them every once in a while. And what I got from this is that Anna Kasparian is a grifter and Cornel West is a grifter. I don't even know who that other guy is. I don't even really care. I don't even want to watch him again. They're both fucking grifters. Anna Kasparian has no principles at all. She will literally say whatever she needs to, dependent on whatever story she's presented with at any given time. And we know that because in the cadence of this very stream, Anna Kasparian contradicted herself. She was like against something, and then it happened in a different context, and she was in favor of it. She has no principles at all. So Anna Kasparian is a grifter. Cornel West, same thing. Cornel West is like, I'm going to say, I got to do the sway. I'm going to say whatever I need to say in order to get people to keep giving me money, because I'm a preacher and I can preach and talk confident. And I just need to say the talking points. I don't even know what the talking points are. Nina Turner, Nina Simone, basically the same person. Like Nina Turner has Nina Simone's energy. That's why I'm saying Nina Simone. It's not because I forgot where I was or what I was gonna say. It's because I got confused and I started going down a road that I was mistaken. But now I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna pretend that it was what I meant all along. That was Cornel West. Man. And he's on MSNBC all the time. Of course. Sean said, just chipping in for some helpful translation services. Thank you, Sean. Well, like I said, guys, we do Socialism Saturday every week at 6 p.m. I will pick out something extra dystopian next week to make up for the lighter fare. This week, we're going back to our roots. But I also want to remind everyone that if you're not in my locals, kb.locals.com. The link is going to be in the description below. And we're going to be watching Fahrenheit 451 tomorrow in my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. So come and join us and watch Fahrenheit 451 with us. The original, not the remake. It's going to be great. We do movie night every single week on Sundays. Thank you to Jennifer for hosting those. And so come to movie night with us. You can get access to my supporter Discord by becoming a member of my YouTube channel, the channel you're watching on right now if you're on YouTube. You can become a member of it by joining us as a supporter in my locals, kb.locals.com/support. You can also join my Patreon, patreon.com/unwoke. Links are in the description below. That's all I got for right now, guys. Have a great rest of your Saturday. We'll see you tomorrow for movie night.